Welcome back. It's been a while, but welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. It's time to remember this crap. Mike Donahue is here, and we have a special edition today. Mike, how are you doing?
Great, Andy. Happy to be back on the microphone with my hot takes, especially tonight.
So now, did you get invited as a season ticket holder? Did you get invited to the circle jerk that they held for themselves tonight, where the Ricketts family gave themselves a plaque for being such great stewards of their ballpark, and they unveiled the most half-assed Hall of Fame in any franchise's history? Did you get?
I
Could
assume
you have gone?
I assume we got invited. The tickets have been in my cousin's name since 1985. My cousin Tom, who lives in DeKalb, um, and had probably had the right correct presence of mind to not even deign to ask any of the other shareholders if there would be any interest. So I don't even know. I'm sure that we were, and but no, had I been afforded that opportunity, I don't think I would have taken them up on it.
The reason this is a special edition is we have a special guest, everybody's favorite season ticket holder, ladies and gentlemen, joining us for the podcast, Al Yellen.
Oh, bring it on! Bring it on!
Al, Al's
I
not
wish
here.
I
Where'd he
was
go?
an Oscar Mayer wiener.
Where did he got? Where he ran out of bologna?
Me.
Is that really? All right.
Did you say before we got on, Andy, that this Hall of Fame is that in left field, like basically right below Al's ass? Is that? Am I pushing too hard for a metaphor of sorts, or
Yeah, I guess he's sitting on top of the Hall of Fame,
okay? Oh, that fits.
located in the left field Budweiser bleacher concourse.
Which is underneath the stands. I would take it. The
Concourse, I guess. Oh, who knows? What
I
the,
don't.
it's most places make like a huge deal out of this. The Cubs are like, oh, I mean, basically, so they sent out the press release, and it's like, uh, we're rededicating Wrigley Field now. All the renovations are done. We're gonna put up a plaque that commemorates it as a national landmark. We're gonna put up a plaque honoring the Ricketts family for their wonderful stewardship. Fuck those
That's a good
guys.
one.
And by the way, we're also going to dedicate the Cubs Hall of Fame. It's going to have 56 people in it, and as you know, we've already had one, and a bunch of them are. No, did anybody know there was one?
No, so it wasn't just me who thought this thing kind of just crept up on us awfully quick.
Was their
Like
idea? Was it the flags? Is
I
that
know
what they
that
thought the Hall of
maybe
Fame was? The
I
stupid
know
flags
that.
that were
I mean,
weird code around the grandstand
they've got the
roof.
flags that we've had the statues. I don't know when it all began. I know that there's always been, not always, but in the modern times, the last 20 years or so, and other teams have, I don't even know if the Bears might have their own, but teams create their own Hall of Fame. The Cubs, who have been in business for 150 years, haven't, and so, that's been a discussion for a while. I think a lot of us have engaged in that theoretical discussion, and all of a sudden, it just seems like 2 days ago. So here it is, and then they're spinning it like, oh, this is just an addition to this long tradition of honoring our past that we've had.
I,
No, this is kind of what people have been looking to have, and you just sort of dropped it on us.
yeah, everyone thought they were going to like build.
There's no
Actually,
marketing.
you know where a good place would have been to have built this thing? Where they put the fucking sports book that nobody
Boom.
needs. Only the Cubs build a huge sports book when fans don't have to go in there to bet. They can just they can go to any bar they want and fire up an app on their
It's
phone.
it's one of those industries that the pandemic sort of illuminated as being very accessible remotely.
So you could have had it there. Hell, you could have. I don't care. You could have built a bar and put the Hall of Fame in the bar. And then little kid Cub fans go to bars. That'd be fine.
Yeah, I was in the Piano Man as young as 9 years old.
I mean, I
Clark
don't.
and Grace.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a farm town. I probably had my first like restaurant experience was most likely at the back table of probably eating something off of a pool table in the back of a tavern.
That's right. Yeah, I just crossing the street after a Cubs game. My dad just needs to wet his whistle, so to speak. And here's they actually had a video game for me to play and a pop to sip. I was in heaven. You were through, old man. You're out. You
Well,
always feel safe.
you bring up a question. Do the Bears have a Hall of Fame?
I should know that. I don't, but they've.
The Bears have a
I don't,
weird, for a team with a proud history.
yep, up until the '60s, yeah.
Yeah, what do they call them? They're a founding member of the NFL.
The charter franchise.
They've retired more numbers than any team in the NFL. And
Absolutely.
most people have no idea what numbers are retired or who they're retired for.
I do, but I'm probably in the, you know, the 66 Bulldogs.
Okay, but here's the flaw in it. Okay, so you're sitting in your seat at Soldier Field. Especially this year now, the guys are going to be wearing single-digit numbers at weird positions. And you're like, how come nobody's number 3? Don't you think you should be able to look up at somewhere and see Nagurski 3, so you know that's why it's retired? Isn't 7 retired for 2 guys?
Avellini and Hallis.
Avellini.
Yeah, isn't that great? Of course, I say Avellini first, but they retired it for Hallis after.
McAfee and Hallis or some weird.
McAfee was 5. There are other numbers that, 51. Jim Morrissey can walk around and say that his number's retired.
51. I never saw Buckus play. I saw Jim Morrissey 51. Now, the one I gave the Bears a free idea, and they didn't take me up on it. What I thought they should have done to honor Peyton is when they stripe the field, they should stripe and put the number. They should stripe the 34-yard line on both sides of the field.
Brilliant. I love it.
Stripe the 35, stripe it, make it orange.
34.
And write the actual 3 and 4 on both sides of the line.
I don't even think the No Fun League would put their foot down on something that would honor Walter Payton. He's pretty universal.
I would pay the fine. As long as it was less than, say, $100. I would pay it.
Yeah, by the way, a quick Google search tells you there's no official Bears Hall of Fame. There might be something called a Bears Ring of Honor, but that's not from the Bears website. That might just be some Ed Hardig type that's got something going. So no, there's no Hall of Fame.
Renovated his basement, and he took the time to paint the names of the numbers on the wall. That's more than the Bears could be on. We don't own the stadium. We can't hang any signs.
Right, Spark District. Municipal. It's governmental. That's a fantastic
could get
point.
Chase Bank to sponsor the Ring of Honor. You'd have a Ring of Honor up. If they sponsored it tonight, the Ring of Honor would be up by Saturday.
Yes.
We know that from the Bears.
Do they not? I mean, I go to at least one game a year, and I have since I was a kid. Do they not? They do not. Do they not have flags at least honoring? I don't think they do.
They've got to have.
I don't think they do. I don't know if there's any kind of a Ring of Honor.
I haven't been to a game since the Sex Boat Vikings. And
okay.
So there's statues up that I've never seen.
I may not have seen the statues either. I usually just go in and out because it's a very inhospitable place to get to. You just want to
wait till they build a shrine in Arlington Heights. It's going to be.
Hey, I ride my bike to that motherfucker. That's 4 miles away from me. Bring it on. They got the footprint. You're right off of 53, right off of 90. And I know there are some people out there that absolutely do not want to hear that, but they don't care. No. But
so the Ricketts had a little thing. They honored themselves. They gave speeches. Hopefully they got booed. I don't know how they could.
There are a couple of guys that we know on Twitter and whatnot that were there. Danny Rocket. You're not gonna. What are you gonna do if you're one guy that's angry and you're gonna use your platform of having a season ticket holder to heckle them? I wouldn't expect him to, but
would you lose your season tickets if you peed into some balloons, tied them up, and threw them at the Ricketts family? Would they take your season tickets? Could they do it?
Depends on what type of relationship you have with your ticket, office manager.
There's a lesser known codicil in the Faber University, Faber College.
Yeah, there's what can you do? I would not go. I mean, the only reason I would go would be to do that, which would be a total bridge burning exercise. It accomplishes nothing and gains persuades nobody in your favor. So, what are you gonna do?
So they did that, and then they let all 8 season ticket holders who showed up got to go down and look at all the plaques. And so instead of, in honor of this, instead of spinning the wheel this week, we're going to remember this crap about the Chicago Cubs Hall of Fame. And we're going to treat it with the reverence which it truly deserves.
100%.
Okay, so here's a few facts about the Chicago Cubs Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame includes 56 plaques.
Okay.
Now they've they made themselves a gray area right at the very beginning here. It says the criteria is you need 5 or more years as a Cub.
5 more. Yep.
The next one, significant contributions to the organization. What they don't use an and or an or.
No conjunction.
So you're not sure if you have to have 5 years and significant contributions or 5 years or. That would make no sense to put a year limit on it or minimum requirement and then have significant contributions. You should just drop the 5 years. So supposedly you're going to have both, but we're going to find out right away there's a problem with that.
Yes, I believe so. Yes. I look forward to examining that. Make sure we're not on.
How did they get the 56 plaques? Well, they got them by, they said 41 members were already enshrined in the previous version of the Cubs Hall of Fame.
The sort of like, it almost feels like a Freemasons club, like this sort of secret. Has anyone heard of this before? They said that previous iteration.
They inducted people between 1982 and 1986.
Okay, I could see that happening actually with the new tradition in Dallas Green coming in, because there were a lot of sort of seismic changes. There was the year that the official the diehard Cubs fan club was created, which later spawned what's that magazine that went out of business after a while?
Fine Line.
Yeah, Vine Line. And my uncle had given me, of my birthday, given me a free subscription, a free annual pass. I was a charter member of the Chicago Cubs diehard fan club. Got a ticket and everything. And then when Vine Line came out, I got a subscription to that. So there was that. And so it might have something to do with that, I think, because there was a lot of like sort of merchandise marketing and like, reading material and stuff like that you would get as a privileged member. I don't think I renewed because I was only 10.
Excuse me. Doesn't the name Hall of Fame imply somewhere there's a hallway with
physical
stuff in it?
Right.
And if the whole thing is, well, no, we wrote a few articles in our half-assed, Tiger Beat fan magazine, that's not a Hall of Fame.
It's a list.
I don't guess. Yeah, so you had a list. Somebody had a list. They probably had it written on steno paper, and it ended up in. They found it in a box when they were thrown. So if they found it in the dumpster right under Ron Santos' car. Hey guys, we found the Hall of Fame.
But how could they do that to the Hall of Fame? Yeah, I will say
frosting on the bottom of that cake.
Yeah, just wipe that off, Crane. Yeah, they. Yeah, I mean the diehard fan club, their newsletters were a little bit glossy. They were not just printed, using the old gluey ditto machines, but it's still not a hall. That hall implies physical presence, not some sort of abstract.
So then they said they also inducted 9 members who were in the previous Cubs Walk of Fame.
Now that we know about a little bit, right? That was when they, I think, redid the park way back in 2006. Tribune actually invested. They redid the bleachers.
Before that, 92 to 98.
92 and 98. Okay, so it had nothing to do with park renovations. So
I pictured like those the bricks that they sold that you actually like put they went around and like, did any players buy bricks? Turk Wendell did. All right, fine. Turk's in the Hall of Fame because he's
right.
That shouldn't work that way.
Well, that fits too. 92 to 98 is that catchphrase alert, mediocrity by design. That was right in the heart of it. And of course, they're going to sort of focus on everything that they can ancillary to the ball club. We know they maximize what they could out of the park, which also goes hand in hand with events from today. And so, the Walk of Fame kind of trying to just drum up memories of good times and maybe not pay so much attention to what's going on in the field.
So at that point they had 50 people inducted into this Phantom Hall of Fame.
Today, just before Andy, before we go further,
there's 6 more that I'll get to.
Okay, but if you go back to whatever they started in 1982 on John McDonough's Apple IIe, would those have been like the people who up until that point were baseball Hall of Famers like Jenkins, or Jenkins wasn't actually, but Banks and Hartnett? Was it so like that? So there was a group that they pulled that were already in this fictional Hall of Fame in '82. I'm just wondering, those must have pretty much just been like all Hall of Famers, and I don't, maybe Joe McCarthy. Just they don't really elaborate on.
No, I mean you can. We'll get to them when we go through the
Okay,
thing.
okay. Mordecai. All right. Anyway,
It's a there's a few Hall of Famers in it. There's I don't know, I can't give it away. Well, Paul Russell's brother
okay.
is in it.
Yes. Okay.
That's
Got it. Got
code.
it.
No one will be able to crack that code.
I hear you. No more. Yeah. I don't want to jump the gun.
So I got him to 50, and then for this they recognize the 5 members who've gone into the Hall of Fame since the Walk of Fame. So
Okay.
that would be 90. So after 98.
Okay.
So
Uh,
it's everybody
San-
after Harry, then, right?
Yeah, yeah, and Harry got it in '89, I think. But
Yeah.
that'd be Sandberg, Santo, Dawson. Jenkins may not have. He was probably in by then. Jenkins, I think, was in, but he kind of got in right around that time.
Be Lee Smith
Okay, yeah, and Suter.
and Harold
Suter
Baines.
probably.
Because people know the Cubs inducted Harold Baines into the Cub Hall of Fame, even though he never played for the Cubs, just to piss off Jerry Reinsdorf.
Yeah, Suter.
Then,
I
of
think, would be
course,
the-
today's inductee, your Aunt Margaret Donahue, Major League
That's right.
Baseball's first female officer, whatever that
That's my
is.
sis- that's-
She was
that's
a
my sis-
policeman, security guard.
Oh, that's it. It's my sister. Watch how you talk about my sister Maggie. I do have a sister, Margaret Donahue. Of course, this Donahue spells her name Dona, one letter off. But yeah, kind of. Actually, I don't think we could fault that one.
It could be
a-
Phil's sister. Well, actually,
Yeah,
given the way they did
he
spelling
was
on
the-
these,
the one.
who knows how she spelled her name?
Oh, maybe I can stake a claim to Aunt
Proofreading,
Midge.
proofreading on the Hall of Fame website, not
I can't wait
not
to
too good.
can't wait to see some of these examples.
And yes, the Cubs Hall of Fame is located in the left field Budweiser bleacher concourse. So they managed to work the Hall of Fame doesn't have a sponsor yet, but they did manage to work a sponsor into the description. So good job.
Sure, the boys at Anheuser-Busch were pleased.
Good hustle.
Attaboy Crane.
All right, so I think the best way to do this is there's 56 of them. We're not going to spend very much time on a bunch of them, but there's a few that I'm sure we could beat to death.
And will.
So when you pull them up, they're in alphabetical order.
Oh,
So-
good. I like that. Bounce around.
So the first one is not Grover Cleveland Alexander. Grover Alexander, better known as Pete.
But he was Grover Cleveland, and they don't put that in there, which is curious because that's what he was known as. He was named after the only president in history to serve 2 non-successive terms in office. He was Grover Cleveland Alexander. Ronald Reagan portrayed
Yeah.
Grover Cleveland Alexander.
So it is Grover Cleveland. Yes, and that's it. The word
No,
Cleveland
maybe
does
not.
not appear on the plaque anywhere. I think this has got to be different, right? Pete Alexander's got to be somebody different than Grover Cleveland Alexander.
You know what? I have to check myself because now I'm worried I may have spoken out of my ass there.
Nobody really.
Yeah, I mean,
I knew that. No, you didn't.
it was Grover Cleveland Alexander. Yeah, but I don't think he could have been named after the president. I think that's a common name because that president was around. Grover Alexander.
Grover Cleveland Alexander.
He was born.
Nickname
Born. Oh, he was born in
Pete.
1887. He most assuredly was named after a president. Surefire Hall of Famer. Back in the days when he'd be winning 30 games, he came in a little bit after Mathewson, a longtime alcoholic. Pitched for the Cubs in the World Series, so there aren't too many guys you can say for that. Didn't put up his best numbers with the Cubs, but deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because pitched in the World Series for him, and he was a Hall of Famer. Had some significant, very colorful career because even after he left the Cubs, he helped the Cardinals beat the Yankees in '26 when he struck out Tony Lazzeri. Just happened to the Cubs are a little bit incidental to his career, but no problem there. It adds to the prestige.
Yeah, his stats with the Cubs. Well, he pitched more for the Cubs, more seasons than any other team.
Is that right?
9 years with the Cubs. He was 128 and 83. That was his
How about
lowest
that?
winning percentage of the 3 teams he pitched for. He pitched for
He pitched far more
Phillies
innings for
twice.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
He pitched for the St. Louis Browns. No, it was the Cardinals. He pitched for the Cardinals. Shit. Well,
Yeah, he pitched.
He should be disqualified from the Hall of Fame.
It's funny that he pitched more seasons for the Cubs. He pitched 700 more innings for the Phillies because he was younger. He was a horse. He hadn't yet gone to World War. It's like actually still a bit of a tragic story with Alexander. He won 30 games 3 fucking times in a row. The guy won over 100, almost 100 games in a 3-year span, from 15 to 17. Goes to war, gets gassed. I think he had epilepsy too. Drinking problem maybe from before the war. So he kind of, when he could see straight, he wins 27 games for the Cubs in 20, and he did pitch long enough when they sort of turned it around at, after the Tinkers, Evers, and Chance era, and Bill Veeck Sr. rebuilt a mini dynasty. He was still there as they were turning the corner, but he did not actually pitch, for the Cubs in a World Series. So I have to take that back. He pitched. They're the only team he didn't pitch in the series.
His best year with the Cubs, 1920. He was 27-14, led the National League in wins, led the National League in ERA 1.91, led the National League in complete games with 33, which was the last time he did it, but the 6th time he'd done it in his career. He threw 7 shutouts. He threw a tidy 363 innings.
Wow.
And led the league in strikeouts with 173. So a different game.
Wow, different sport, man.
Strikeout.
Different sport. Great pitcher though. He won. What did he win for the Cubs? Total 128 games. So that ranks. So even if he wasn't even if he wasn't great elsewhere, he probably 125 wins might do it. I guess we'll see when we go over other guys that we saw. But no problem there. Good on you, Pete. Of course, the next guy.
All right, so the next guy on the list is the great Mordecai Three Finger Brown, who is best known for Emily having 3 fingers. I don't know. Apparently he mangled them in a threshing accident or something. But he won 188 games for the Cubs. He had the franchise record 1.80 ERA. In 10 seasons with the Cubs. That's his career ERA with the Cubs is 1.80. He won 20 games every year from 1906 to 11. That stretch featured 2 World Championships, 4 pennants. His 188 wins are second most in franchise history, and he was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1949. So he unlike Coy Hill, he didn't have his fingers cut off and then sewn back on in a weird Frankenstein fashion. He just lost parts of them, and he always claimed then that because of his disfigured hand, it allowed him to do crazy things with the ball, which is great. He also, though, it wasn't just that. He also invented spider tack. All right, so the next one then would be Frank Chance, who was in as a first baseman and as a manager.
Yeah, peerless leader.
There's only 2 men in the world, in the history of the world, who have managed the Cubs to a World Series championship, and only one of them is still alive. It's just Frank Chance and Joe Madden.
How about that?
Frank played for the Cubs from 05 to 12. Led them to 2 World Series championships. Should have been 3. Nobody knows how they lost to 1906 to the White Sox.
It was a fluke.
4 pennants, and they won 116 games in 1906. So
and how many did they lose?
Won 138.
Which is incredible. 116 games in like 154. Was it still? I think it was not even 154.
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay, all right. That's just astonishing. Inarguably the greatest single season, regular season. Of course, it doesn't end in triumph.
Well, who was the other manager who managed a team to 116 wins? Also a former Cub.
Would that be Lou?
Yeah, Lou.
Yeah.
And they didn't win a fucking thing either. So.
Yeah. Bulls are one of the few teams to pull that off, it seems.
You gotta be a really good team to 116 games and not.
Yeah. But yeah, Frank deserving. Mordecai deserving. Grover deserving.
Oh, I was wrong. 1906 Cubs, 116, 36, and 3.
Oh, ties. Forgot about those ties.
And they overachieved because their Pythagorean win-loss 115 and 37. So.
That's what the managerial acumen of Frank Chance will provide. So
no. The next guy is a guy who I only know how to say his name because Harry would talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
Kyler, not Kiki.
Not Kiki.
Not
no.
Kiki Vanderway. Kai
I
Kyler.
I grew up hearing a few secondhand Kyler stories only because my father, who today is 88, himself was a young lad hearing stories of his father who would regale him with tales of those. I had alluded to the team that Bill Veck Sr. had sort of brought back from the ashes in the late 20s. And they won 4 pennants in, I think, 10 years, 29, 32, 35, and 38. They lost every World Series, which was its own narrative. Kyler was one of the better players in that team, along with Riggs Stevenson and Hall of Famers Hartnett and Hornsby, whom we'll get to. But I would say deserving. I also like to note that Kyler, one of the former Cubs whose last name shares the name of a street that is within, in this case, just a couple of miles of Wrigley Field. Kyler Street runs just north of Irving Park, a couple blocks. Yeah, so fun fact.
Well, and
deserving.
At least based on the picture here on his fake plaque. Handsome. That guy's a handsome guy.
Yeah. He's got some oceanic blue eyes. Yeah, good player. I mean, he played on those teams. I don't know if he's a real Hall of Famer, but he's definitely would be a Cub Hall of Famer.
Next up is a guy that I'm not sure I'm familiar with.
No.
Ernie Banks. I don't think I've ever heard of him.
The real Mr. Cub. I mean, not much to say, obviously. I mean, he was the most celebrated former Cub of our lifetime because he was living. And
because he was fucking awesome.
He was, yeah. Fucking shortstop. Yeah, shortstop who took the league by storm, won back-to-back MVPs, just 500 home runs eventually. Mr. Cub. What more can you say?
14-time All-Star. Won back-to-back MVPs on last-place teams. Or were they last place or second division? Just second division.
Second division. You had to really work hard to be last place in an 8-team league.
And is he the first Cub to get his number retired?
He was, 1982. Again, part of this sort of whole thing that Tribune Company ushered in when Tribune Company was a good thing, which we haven't talked about on the wheel spinning, the Tribune One, not the mediocrity by design, but where they actually sort of had some savvy people, hired the right folks, and did some things. And from a marketing angle, I don't know if this would have been a John McDonough thing, but the whole, so-called original Hall of Fame and the diehard Cubs fan club and Vine Line and retiring numbers, all of that was ushered in when Tribune Company bought the team in '82, and that Ernie's was retired the very first season in '82.
Next up, first baseman, war number 44. Not Anthony Rizzo. Phil Cavarretta.
Local product, graduates from Lane Tech High School, and 18 months later is playing in the 1935 World Series as a frickin' 20-year-old. It's pretty awesome. Long career. Again, not a Major League Hall of Famer, but he's a lot like probably Mark Grace. I don't know if the numbers would bear it out. By 45, he actually won the MVP. I guess he kind of fell in that gap where he was a little too old to go off to war, but could still pound some 4A. Pitching, and that was the Cubs' last World Championship till 2016. Deserving, Phil Cavaretta, local guy.
355 in 1945.
Yeah, also managed the Cubs through their first dark age in the 50s, when the curtain shut for a few years. And I think might share a distinction, or might have a distinction shared by few other managers in that he got fired during spring training. So.
Oh, well, good for him.
Yeah.
He looks a little bit like Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah, Italian first baseman wearing number 44. I mean, it's
a little bit smaller.
A lot of similarities
than the Riz. 5'11", 175 pounds. So, a good 5 inches smaller than Riz, but same number. I'm sure that's why Anthony wore it in honor of him.
Yeah. Anthony seems really educated, really sharp and up on things like that.
Here's a guy that I'm sure you know all about, John Clarkson.
Oh, sure. Beat a man to death with a bottle of rum over a game of faro. 19th century. Well, they all look alike, right?
He's your Huckleberry. He played for the Cubs from 1884 to 1887.
So he doesn't meet the 5-year standard.
No.
Okay. I have to look up Clarkson.
With the Cubs. He won.
I mean, we know that there was no World Series before. There were pennants. The Cubs won about 4 or 5 pennants in the pre-World Series era, and there was supposedly, I guess, that there were postseason competitions. But in the years in which Mr. Clarkson played there, I guess there were 3 postseasons that he played, or only two at the Cubs: 1885 and '86. So
he
I guess that does it.
he led the league in wins in 1885 with 53.
Wow. Wow. Eat
Little,
that,
it's not even the same
Hoss Radmore.
sport, for God's
It's not.
sakes.
Right. We're talking about Grover Cleveland, who's like 30 years after this, right? 35, almost 40 years after that, really. Yeah, 1.13 ERA for the Cubs. Well, that was in the postseason. Sorry, he bounced around a little bit. Yeah, only on them for 3 years, but those were apparently 2 pennant winners, two of the pre-20th century pennant winners. So, especially in light of how successful the Cubs have been at collecting pennants since the 20th century, you have to put John Clarkson in. So they did their homework on him. A worthy.
So we already had Frank Chance. Now it's time for Johnny Evers.
That was how they pronounce it, correct?
Right. They only made it Evers for the poem, which I don't know why it's any different.
Tinkers the it wouldn't have made a difference reading it out. I don't know how second baseman rated offensively. I feel like if I were to look up Johnny Evers' numbers, I'm not going to be impressed offensively. There's no bold anywhere. Even on whatever they have they don't have defensive metrics, do they? Yeah, we know him from the poem. He was part of the great team, so I'll say that's fine, right? They won 3 straight pennants. Evers actually hung around with the Cubs to be on their '09 pennant winner, so he played on 4 pennant winners and one of the greatest teams in history. Really, they were up until the Yankees came along. I think the Cubs, the '06, '07, '08, '09, 1910 Cubs were considered one of the historically great teams.
So, of course, the immortal double play combination of Tinkers to Evers to Chance.
Tinker.
Right. That's the other. Tinker. Well, no, I said it wrong. Nobody calls it Tinkers. Tinker to Evers to Chance. They played 770 games together. How many double plays do you think they turned?
770 games, 5 seasons worth.
They're immortal. The whole poem is about.
Well, I'm going to set the over/under at 500. I'm curious if they
they're so far under you couldn't see it from 500.
Okay, that might have been a high guess. I mean, I wasn't guessing. I'm just trying to figure 700. You're talking about 4 or 5 seasons.
Let's just say John Clarkson almost won as many games in 1885 as these guys turned double plays in 770 games. 54.
Incredible.
54. They played in 21 World Series games. How many double plays do you think they turned in those 21 World Series games?
How many?
None. That's quite a poem.
Wow. That's a powerful myth.
Yes, it is.
It propelled, because I think Joe Tinker is even a worse ball player, even though he was a shortstop. So you got to give a shortstop the nod if he's out there. But yeah, that must be a powerful myth for all 3 of those guys. Johnny Evers, however they do it, does have a 47.7 WAR, which in my book is not Hall of Fame material. However, I believe that's leagues ahead of Harold Baines. So by the Baines argument, I guess Evers is in.
Better. Well, I guess we probably should compare Joe Tinker to Ryan Theriot. Let's see.
When we get to maybe we get to Tinker, we'll do that. Well, actually, right?
Let's see. Theriot will be just before him on the list alphabetically.
Yeah, and by the way, Harold Baines 38.7 WAR. Johnny Evers hasn't beat since Harold Baines. Wow. So yeah, and he's in a poem and whatever.
Yeah,
put him in.
Harold is the worst Hall of Famer.
Of course, no, and we can come back to that. But that argument could be used now to justify so many others. But Johnny Evers is already in, or Johnny Evers is already in.
Well, I'm really excited to go to Candy Maldonado's Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah.
In the Harold Baines wing of the Hall of Fame. Okay, Clark Griffith.
So would this be? He's in here as a player. The picture is him in a suit. Is a young man. He was a player,
and executive,
and somehow amassed enough money to buy a team.
Oh, as a pitcher, he won 152 and 96 in 8 seasons.
Okay,
he was the first Cub pitcher to win 20 games 6 straight times.
Okay.
Led the league in ERA at 1.88, and he was elected in 1898. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1946.
Okay.
He is not the Clark Griffith who owned the Twins, though, right?
I thought he was. I thought he
Well,
was
maybe he is,
the
because
grandfather.
executive. What the fuck's he doing in the Cub Hall of Fame?
Well, did Albert Spalding front him like money from the sporting good? Like, how did he amass? Was he just an educated Easterner that played ball but had a trust fund? Like, he is. I want to make sure. I have to just do a dive. Clark Griffith of the Cubs. Clark Calvin Griffith of the Cubs, 1869 to 1959,
Yeah.
nicknamed the Old Fox. American League Baseball pitcher, manager, team owner. Began his MLB playing career with the St. Louis Browns, Reds, and then the Cubs Orphans. Then served as player manager for the Chicago White Stockings, which was the Cubs, and the New York Highlanders, which became the Yankees from 03 to 07. Retired as a player after 07. Remaining manager, blah, blah, blah. He went over to Washington, made some appearances as a player. He owned the Senators from 1920. So I don't. It doesn't really. I'm sure if you go into the wiki,
Well,
somehow
the Senators
amassed enough.
became. So Clark W. must be his son. Because the Senators became the Twins, right?
Yes, correct. The first Senators became the Twins.
Right. So
Second
Clark
became the
W.
Rangers.
Griffith
Yes, yes.
is the guy we think of as the pre-Carl Pohlad owner, and that would have been this
That's
guy's
exactly
kid.
right. That's it.
So here's how he bought 10% of the Senators for $27,000 in 19.
Okay. So they're worth 270.
He
They
sold a
sucked.
cattle ranch. He sold not even the ranch. He sold cattle on his Montana ranch, then mortgaged the ranch, and then bought 10% of the
Montana.
Senators, and then started taking it over. So
Pretty
all right.
savvy. Pretty savvy. All right. Right. So he's a ball player that had a little bit of a nest egg and leveraged all that to become the guy whose son would own a team that would eventually let Andy McPhail take 2 ill-gotten championships and make his way to Chicago and set us back for a while.
Yeah,
There you go.
quite the circle of life there. Death. Next one, legitimately great player who they damn with fate and praise at the beginning of his plaque when they call him one of the Cubs' greatest leadoff hitters.
Wow.
So well known for them. It is Stan Hack.
Yep. My Uncle Bud's favorite player. Singles, doubles, triple. Probably might be best known for Cubs were in the 1935 World Series against the Tigers. They were down in the series 3-1, hoping to rally back, pushed the game to I think either extra innings or top of the ninth, and Stan Hack got a leadoff triple, and he ended up being stranded on third, didn't score. Yeah, Mike Royko used to write a little bit. I think it might have been one of Mike Royko's favorite players. Again, I don't believe Stan Hack is a baseball Hall of Famer. He's kind of more that Mark Grace territory. Like, probably may have led the league in hitting once or twice. Played on pennant winners. Played with the guys that I mentioned before, Kai Kyler and Stevenson, and and Hartnett. So
one of the great Cub number 6s to make All-Star Game appearances, which also includes, of course, Keith Moreland and Brian LaHare.
I don't believe Keith Moreland made the Hall of Fame, nor did Glen Allen Hill, but you're right about Brian LaHare.
Well, no, All-Star. Just All-Star appearances. Was Keith Moreland ever an All-Star? Maybe he was.
I don't think with the Cubs. No, I love Moreland, but I don't think he was.
So how come Pat didn't introduce him as what is it? How does he
former Cub, and All-Star, right?
Keith Moreland. Actually,
because Moreland never represented the Cubs as an All-Star. He led the team in hitting one year.
That's why he has to parse.
I know, but like had Moreland,
actually,
he could have said
Moreland was ever an All-Star.
No, he never was. No. He was he probably was, but he was one of my favorite players. So careful. Stan Hack actually, interestingly, led the league in caught stealing 5 years in a row between 1936 and 1940. 55.5 WAR. That actually puts him in arguable Hall territory, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, over 2,000 hits. But yeah, it's totally deserved.
Never an All-Star. He got robbed in. I guess his best chance would have been
82 or 83. He led the team with a 302 batting average, I think.
82 was his best year. 128 OPS plus. And then he was pretty good in 85.
Yeah, I like Moreland. He gave it his all.
Actually, 85, that's probably the year he should have been an All-Star. He finished 17th that year in MVP voting.
Okay, in 85, okay. But yeah, Hack, 2,200 hits. No problem there, Stan. Good for you.
Predecessor to the dandy little glove man, Billy Herman, a master of the hit and run. Batted .309 with 346 doubles in 11 seasons as a Cubs. as a Cub. 200 hits 3 times. He was Nick Madrigal before it was cool. 7-time All-Star with the Cubs. Batted .341 in 1935. He was elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1975.
Because the Cubs kind of bailed on him. He was on some of the pennant winners, I want to say. He played for they dealt him to the Dodgers where he really shined. Dodgers, of course.
He would have been 32, 35, and 38.
30. He was on all three of those teams.
Yeah,
okay.
31 to 41.
And man, he was a young man. Yeah, 22. I'm looking at it now. They sent him to Brooklyn right when Brooklyn finally stopped sucking after 2 decades because they won in their first year. In his first year, they're in 41. I know Brooklyn won the pennant. Went off to war. Actually, they're a player with one Brooklyn pennant winner. Probably an overrated Hall of Famer, frankly. He got 2,300 hits. And how many with the Cubs? I mean, can we nitpick him? 1,700, played on 3 pennant winners. Yeah, I'm fine with Billy Herman being in.
Another one of your favorites. I know you grew up admiring this guy's work. King Kelly.
Another
1980 to 1886.
Well-mustachioed.
He looks like a trapeze artist.
Right. Is this the character in Three Musketeers? What
D'Artagnan.
It's like his mustache is groomed.
He was an outfielder and a catcher.
And I believe that 1880 to 1886, I'd like to think that he was a catcher in the days when catchers did not wear gloves.
There's no mask. There's no way. No mask, no cup, no glove.
Yeah.
It's basically just that stupid picture he's got on in the picture. That's the way they protected it.
I would say that anybody that played at least 100 games at catcher between 1875 and 1885, just played 100 games as a catcher, should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
They gave you, at the end of the season, they gave you $100 for every tooth that was left in your head.
And every finger that was just bent perpendicular to the knuckle. Yeah. Go ahead, King Kelly. I'm not going to argue with the guy that played catcher without equipment.
Cool name, King Kelly. They don't even bother with what his real name was. Maybe he's King.
Wasn't it Mike? I think it was Mike, wasn't it? No? All right. See, even that though, is that how you? So I know these are fake plaques. Are the real plaques on the wall? Do we know underneath Al Yellen's ass in left field?
It's probably they had some intern print them out on a white
copier. They're just sort of behind a laminated sleeve, right? Got to kind of going with the whole half-assed printing a list to begin with. Is it really even a plaque? So.
Yep, Michael Joseph Kelly. Ooh,
yeah,
baseball
there you go.
Reference picture. He really looks like a Peaky Blinders. Good Lord. Next up, a true Cub immortal. He did it all for the Cubs. Charlie Grimm.
Did it all, included playing the banjo.
Oh, well, good. First baseman, manager, broadcaster, executive.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much it. The
Player
last
32 to 36. There's 2 pennants in there.
Yep.
Also managed pennant winners in 35. Came back in 45. 296 for a career in 12 years. He led the National League in fielding percentage 4 times. Nobody cares.
The first baseman, Cubs have a history of that, as we've discussed. Didn't know it went that far back, but that's good to know. Slick glove man. So, cheers to Charlie.
Gabby Hartnett.
Baseball Hall of Famer. Still the greatest Cubs catcher. Wilson could give him a run for his money if the Ricketts let him stay around, but
and who knows how long Austin Romine will hang around? He might.
That's
Robinson Chirinos. He's a young man. He's only 38. He's still got a decade.
That's a good point.
Left.
Yeah,
Cubs are awash in great catching right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I think most fans know about Hartnett. Also among those 4 pennant winners, I don't think he was on all. I don't know if any of them were on all 4 of those pennant winners from 29 to 38. If anyone was, it would have been Hartnett. He was a manager for part of it. Hit the homer in the Gloman in 38 off of Mace Brown. Like I said, Baseball Hall of Famer, no brainer.
So now a homer in the Gloman. He hits a ball that it's getting dark at Wrigley. So what team was that against?
Pittsburgh.
Against Pittsburgh. Pirates insisted it wasn't really a home run, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't they go? Did they run out of replay challenges? Is that why?
I think they did. Yeah, I forget.
Break. You gotta save one.
I don't know.
Couldn't get the umps to do that.
I forget who Pittsburgh's manager was. I don't know, Boats McLaughlin, or I'm just pulling a name out of my ass. Had burned it earlier. But yeah, so that lives in lore. But unlike Tinkers and Evers to Chance, where some sort of a work of prose sort of accentuates and elevates them, Hartnett didn't need that that sort of heroic single moment to catapult him. He was a Hall of Famer no matter what, but that certainly is part of his legacy.
Well, and Gabby's a great name.
Uh-huh.
Weird name for a guy, but it's a great name.
Owned a bowling alley, I think, in Lincolnwood. I had a bar in Clark and Lawrence. My 100-year-old aunt who passed away a month ago told me a story of running into Gabby Hartnett on the beach, I think at Montrose, like, the 30s.
And I'll bet he had this swimming suit pulled up right under
That's
his
right.
armpits.
Right, that's it. Man about town.
Hands on his waist, so they're just up under his armpits. He's just standing there. Like, look, I'm Gabby
Right.
Hartnett.
Yep, as they do.
Yeah, so he played 20 years in the big leagues, 19 for the Cubs. He finished up with the Giants. And I'm looking here quick to see if he was a catcher all 20 years, which would be pretty ridiculous. And he was.
Yes, I think they were back then. I don't see them.
That's a lot of squatting.
One of the 3 or 4 greatest catchers, I'm guessing, the first half of the 20th century. Probably one of the. He may still be in the team photo for top 10 catcher of the 20th century.
Did you say what his nickname was?
Well, I thought it'd be Gabby. I don't know what his birthday name was.
Oh, he's got one of the great nicknames ever. Old Tomato Face.
Of course. It just screams like a Three Stooges episode.
Face.
Black and white. Like.
Here's a great player who barely played for the Cubs.
Yeah.
Rogers Hornsby.
Yeah.
Now he did win. Did he win a batting title with the Cubs? He hit 350 he hit 350 for his career with the Cubs. Hit 380 in 29. His first year with the Cubs, he was the MVP.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
So he played 29, 30, 31, 32. He played 4 seasons. Now that does not, that's not enough, right? They said you got to do 5 years.
Right. Made significant contribution would be, if we're assuming the absence of a conjunction, so, if you're to interpret it to be or.
Well, there's a sentence they tacked onto the end of the plaque here that gives them wiggle room. Was a player manager from 30 to 32 and later served as a broadcaster and coach with Chicago.
Okay. I guess what they're counting is that he kind of helped cultivate a young Ronnie Santo and Billy Williams. I know he coached them. Santo would not say a bad word about him. Hornsby was known as a real asshole. I'm actually shocked to hear that he did broadcasting. He just kind of a little bit of strange, obsessive, like a lot of great players. Sometimes their personalities can be nasty and obsessive and, focused on one thing. It didn't bother Santo or Williams because they were great players. I think he was harder on the younger ones, but he was part of that organization for a long time. He did win an MVP with the Cubs, and he did play in a World Series. So even though he didn't play 5 years, I guess he's in.
Former White Sox manager Don Kessinger.
I'm like, what did my browser go to another page? What were we doing here? How in the world? Yeah, like you say, last player manager before Pete Rose, so the second to last player manager in history. Also a single-digit WAR. We talked about this before the show. I tweeted about it because when I saw him, this was the one that jumped out. Nothing against Don Kessinger, slightly before our time. My dad loved those teams. I know my older brothers kind of remember them. We've beaten it to death. I mean, first of all, this is a team itself that has 4 National Baseball Hall of Fame players on it, a team that never won a pennant during a divisional era.
Yep.
Never even made the postseason in a divisional era, and so putting 4 Hall of Famers in there in the National Hall of Fame seems kind of interesting, even though statistically it's hard to argue against any of them. It really is. I don't know what statistical merits they would have used for the Cub Hall of Fame.
So if the Cubs had 4 bona fide Hall of Famers during that era, that basically says the guys they played with weren't good.
Because they never made the playoffs.
But they're somehow
riding the coattails.
Adjacent. They just
right. Yeah. They get to ride the coattails somehow.
Kessinger, he got MVP votes in 69 and 70. His OPS plus in 69 was 86, and in 70 it was 77. Remember, 100 is league average. He's getting MVP votes. He won Gold Gloves both years. He was an All Star 6 times, 5 years in a row. He
Okay.
never had an
Now,
OPS plus in the 90s, much less 100. He stole 100 bases in 16 years and got caught 85 times.
wow. Wait a
He may
second.
have been a whiz as a shortstop.
Barely.
He was not a good baseball player.
No, that's barely 50%. I mean, 100 out of 185
Yeah.
attempts. That would
Stop
get you run
running.
out of the league. That would get you run out of the league today. 54% steal rate. That's what it took him to reach those triple digits. That's that's almost a crime. I don't want to give this Hall of Fame any more credibility than it deserves, but that is a crime against humanity.
His career slugging was 312. I can't wait to go see Matt Duffy's plaque in the Cubs.
I right and
Great.
yeah, that's wiffle ball Hall of Fame.
Because it's like, well,
Wow.
he did home runs. He hit 14 homers in 16 years. But
And
he also only hit 254 doubles in 16 years.
well, you
His
already said it.
162 game average was a 252 hitter with 20 doubles, 6 triples, a homer, 41 RBIs. That doesn't get you honorable mention all conference, much less a Cubs Hall of Fame. Jesus.
That is incredible. That is just like so. I wonder what the story is there.
Well, they were like, we was the All Star 6 times. Well, somebody's got to be.
But he's even
They had to
before.
fill out a team, and so they're like, fuck.
Who's making the case for him though? Like he's even before
They're like,
a
all right,
young,
we already bought train tickets for Banks, Santo, and Jenkins. Maybe they can just stow Kessinger away, and then he can be the backup shortstop for the All Star game.
right. But like, who was caping for him? Like, he played even before like this Ricketts era where he was like Chad douchebag hanging out in the bleachers. I mean, I don't know who like had to make the case for nothing against him. Don Kessinger, for all I know, could be a hell of a guy. And like I said, he's remembered fondly by my dad, as I'm sure he was yours.
I'm sure.
But holy shit, man, that guy's. And we know shortstops were, like we said, offense was an afterthought for a long, long time. But that's special.
So I guess maybe the greatest manager, either the greatest or second greatest manager in Cub history, Joe McCarthy.
Well, I think it'd be Chance then Madden. The thing about McCarthy is that the Cubs, I think, lowballed him, and he went to the Yankees, and then that's where he became a legend with Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio. When was he manager for the Cubs? He was the guy.
30.
Yeah, he was the guy to bring them back out of their doldrums again after the Chance era. He was a young up and coming guy, and when Miller Huggins, his health was ailing. The Yankees, I think McCarthy actually got fired, so it makes it even worse. He wasn't plucked from the Cubs, and I don't know if Bill Veeck was still alive. I think he was. I think got rid of him. There's probably, if anything, Joe McCarthy should just stand as a sort of regretful decision in Cubs history because he might have had more success with the Cubs than what they with rotating Hornsby and bringing Charlie Grimm and whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, if you at this point now, Don Kessinger, the floor has been reached. We got our old Harold Baines, so I'm not going to go against Joe McCarthy being in. I mean, especially for a team that only has been to 11 World Series in the century. Took him to one of them.
He managed 4 full seasons and part of a 5th for the Cubs because he got canned in 1930.
Yeah.
Although he got canned pretty late because he managed 152 games, so they only fired him with 2 games to go.
Yeah.
For the Cubs, he was 442 and 321, a 579 winning percentage.
So did he come back? Was he in the other dugout then in 32 when Ruth called his shot at Wrigley Field?
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, he won. He managed the Yankees for 16 years. He won 8 pennants, 7
incredible.
World Series. They won 100 games.
And then even he was outdone by Casey Stengel. But that's one of those things in history, right, where things were changing. By the time Joe McCarthy was let go by the Cubs, the Yankees were, had just sort of arrived, but nobody knew that they would go on that run of historic dominance. So it's one of those what ifs. What if the Cubs had not let go of McCarthy,
So speaking of the 32 World Series,
segue.
is Charlie Root.
who threw the fateful pitch.
Yes,
Great pitcher.
and for people who said at least the Cub lore was if you knew Charlie Root, if he really thought that Babe was standing at home plate pointing at center field, that's where he was going to hit it. The next pitch would have been right in Babe's neck.
And I think there's probably some truth to that myself. I think a lot of pitchers back then, I think that's how the game was, honestly. And Root was an above average. Cubs had a sort of an arsenal of not great, not good, but great, not great, but good pitchers like Lon Warnicki would be another Bill Lee, the other Bill Lee.
Not Spaceman.
No, not Spaceman. Not as colorful. He was, in 27, Root won 26 games. He won 200 as a Cub, which, back then I think ranks high. And pitched in, he was one that pitched in all three, or all four. I mentioned earlier about, I don't know how many Cubs were on those four different pennant winners, but Charlie Root would be one of them. So absolute, no doubt about it, Cub Hall of Famer. Much deserved.
Third baseman from 1960 to 1973, Ron Santo. 5-time Gold Glove winner, 9-time All-Star.
Oh, no. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. National Baseball.
Him and Bruce Kim had their number retired in an emotional ceremony.
How dare you disrespect my favorite Cub, Leon Durham, like that? But
don't you remember that Bruce had to Ron had to give permission for Kim to wear it?
It hadn't been retired, though. It would be
it had
soon.
been taken out of circulation.
Yeah.
But as a tribute to Jim Leland, Bruce Kim wanted to wear number 10. If I was Ron, I would have been like, fuck off. No.
Yeah.
Tough shit.
Right.
And I'm kind of surprised considering Ron had a reputation as a guy who basically would have told people to fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't.
Maybe softened at his old age.
So we talked about Ron several times on here. He was, for a long time, he was the best player not in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's in the Hall of Fame, although he did not live to see it.
Posthumous.
Yeah, he was a great player. And he sold pizza and toupees and Seattle Sutton Acapulco taco pie. He did it all.
That's right. Yeah. A no-brainer, like I said. Good for Ronnie.
Albert A.G. Spalding.
Yep. A legend. I want to say, I think I read somewhere. He's from Rockford, right? Did you know that?
Oh, of course, I live in his house.
That's how it works.
Yep.
I believe he was born in Byron, Illinois, if I'm not mistaken.
Had that weird. No, he didn't. Did he? Yeah, he had the weird U in his name, but didn't Spalding? Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's a different Spalding. Spalding? Well, that kid'll eat anything.
It's Spalding Smales.
I'll have a hamburger. No,
a cheeseburger, a hot dog. Yeah, you'll have nothing in liking. Well, this Albert is the.
I know the U is in Spalding Smales, but not in Albert Spalding.
There's no U in this one.
No, there is in the. Spalding from Caddyshack has a U in his name.
Okay.
There is an Albert Spalding with a U. That's not this guy.
Yeah. Interesting career. I mean, the guy managed to win 252 games in basically 6 seasons.
Yeah. He, according to his Cub plaque with William Hulbert, he co-wrote the Constitution that founded the National League.
Yeah, he was. I don't know if he went to college, but he seemed pretty sharp. He was certainly entrepreneurial because he started the sporting goods company. Was born in Byron, but I think he got a start in Rockford. Ended up in Boston before coming to the Cubs in 1876. His last full season as a pitcher goes out on top with 47 wins.
He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and there's way too much information here on his baseball reference page. He was cremated. Why do we need to know that?
Yeah. So, but pretty much a foundational member of the franchise.
Andy Pafko.
Sure, we talked about Andy recently. Center field,
last great
outside of Rick Monday, the last great
center fielder.
Yeah. Besides Monday,
was he from Boysville, Wisconsin? His name is the Boys.
He was a local guy, and in the Cubs. Yeah, he ended up playing some pennant winners for the Dodgers. Nice career, well deserved. Pafko's not a baseball Hall of Famer. I don't think so. I'm almost positive he's not. No.
His nicknames were Handy Andy and Prushka. I don't want to know what that translates to. He's from Boyceville, Wisconsin. He was the boy from Boyceville, which is just somebody's not even putting in the time. That's way too on.
Right. Yeah. He in his retirement, I know he lived near the Mount Prospect golf course. People would say how nice he was. Yeah, I think he may have worked as a starter there, just to get out of the house. But Andy Paffick would be the kind of guy like a Mark Grace that this thing is kind of created for, guys that were memorable for a while, really good players, and just not great players. That's why teams have their own Hall of Fames.
Jimmy Ryan played
No
from
idea.
1885 to 1900. He led the National League in home runs.
With what, 4?
In 1888 with 16.
Wow, a slugger. I was surprised to see that he doesn't wear a mustache. It's the first player from the 19th century
Does
that
have a tie on, though.
is not mustachioed.
Over his baseball uniform. It's a suit, coat, and a tie, and you can see the CA from Chicago on the shirt under it. So I don't know what's going on there. He could fill in at all the outfield positions, as well as third, second, shortstop, and pitcher. Basically, the Ian Happ of his era.
Oh, Jesus. Let's get Ian's plaque ready.
Hank Sauer.
Yeah, probably a borderline Cub Hall of Famer. He was an MVP, I believe, 54. He had some pop. But
52. He won the MVP.
52, okay. And he had
121 RBIs.
He had a brother, too, that played for the Cubs. I will say, if anything, Sauer was on those teams that were the first teams in history that were year in and year out not competitive. Again, that's the 1950s, the first dark age. That your dad, my dad, growing up, hearing stories of Kai Kyler and Gabby Hartnett and whatnot, getting so excited to follow the next generation, and then for the first time in history, it's second division. And Hank Sauer would be one of the guys that they would get to root for.
Joe Tinker. 259 career hitter. Stole 304 bases in 12 years.
Okay.
Is the starting shortstop for the back-to-back world champs in 07 and 08. Led all NL shortstops in fielding 4 times. Assists 3 times. He was player manager in 16 and was elected for some unknown reason to the real Hall of Fame in 1946. Well, it's because of the fucking poem.
Of course, has a higher
double plays anyway.
Right, has a higher WAR than Evers, so that's a feather. If anything, Evers is the guy you start with to make a case against. 53.2 WAR is probably not really Hall of Famer. It is above the Harold Baines line. He was a shortstop, player of the pennant winners, certainly a Cub Hall of Famer. But yeah, I think him and Evers both. It's questionable if they're truly deserving National Hall of Famers, but it certainly belongs in the left field bleachers, I guess.
Pitcher from 1913 to 1921, James Hippo Vaughn.
Yep.
151 games and wins in 9 seasons. The most by a lefty in franchise history.
Oh, I did not know that. I would have just guessed that he made it because, again, for more prosaic reasons, because he participated in what would be considered the first 9-inning double no-hitter with Fred Toney of the Reds, I believe, at Wrigley Field, 1917.
His 151 wins as a lefty, just ahead of John Lester, Steve Trout, and Lance Dixon.
No kidding. And so now that Lester, boy, that record, I had no idea that Hippo Vaughn had a Cub record that was.
I really don't know who was.
Oh, I thought you were looking.
Lance Dixon was 0-3, wasn't he?
Well, I basically perseverated on the John Lester one. I didn't even hear Dixon. I didn't even know. I don't remember that Dixon was left-handed. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 151 for a left-hander, not a very high bar, but it's a bar nonetheless. So on those grounds alone, let Hippo in, and then there's the no-hitter, which, of course, the no-hitter, I don't know who broke it up, but I know that Jim Thorpe, All-American, played in that game and had another hitter. It somehow factored into the final score, but...
let's see here. Was Bill Lee left-handed? The other Bill Lee was, right?
The spaceman was. I don't think the other one was.
I can't. So
no,
Hippo
it's not.
Has the 8th most wins in Cub history at 151. Bill Lee and John Clarkson are the only 2 more on this list.
We don't know, so but everyone else you can definitively tell are right-handers.
Really, who's the next lefty?
Interesting. Yeah, Lester wouldn't even have won 100, especially in this era. And nobody that we saw, God knows, right? Shit.
Oh, they didn't have Greg Hibbard. was the best left
Yeah,
hander.
the great hitter, Danny Jackson. Trout's probably in the top 10 in our lifetime of Cub left-handers in victories.
Let's see. Here we go.
Or
Does it?
just say innings pitched.
So 11th, Ed Rulebach. Uh, Rick Russell, 12th. Greg Maddux. We know he wasn't. We know those two weren't lefties.
Neither. Yeah, I don't think
Grover
Roebuck
Cleveland
was a
Alexander, Carlos Zambrano, Claude Passau,
right-hander.
Pat Malone, Bob Rush, Lon Warnicki, Jack Taylor,
Yeah,
Bill Hance. No.
I don't know if Bill Hands,
No
he may have been.
overall.
I just don't know. He was. Yeah,
Honestly, unless let's.
I wonder how common left-handers. I assume all those old pitchers like Mathewson and Rube Waddell and Mordecai Brown, some of the guys you mentioned, Alexander. I just assume they're all right-handers, but I could be wrong. So this is why I like doing things like this because I learned something tonight. Hippo Vaughn is the all-time leader in Cubs history for wins with a left-handed pitcher.
And he had jug
I
handle
appreciate it.
ears.
He sure did.
Serve. Really.
Yeah. A gale force coming in off of Lake Michigan might propel him out of the ballpark on a windy day.
Hack Wilson.
Our very own Babe Ruth, I guess, because he did hit 56 homers in a season once.
Greatest
And
center fielder in Cub history.
And drink like a fish. Yeah, the fact that he played center field, I think, probably speaks to the fact that the Cubs couldn't break
5'8",
through.
200 pounds.
A fire
But he
plug.
covered a lot of ground out there.
And he did. I brought it up in a previous cast, but he did famously drop a ball with an 8-run lead in the 1929 World Series that turned the whole damn series around. So maybe if Hack Wilson's not your center fielder, the Cubs win a World Series. Was a great hitter. Bill Veeck, right? And if you ever read Veeck is in Wreck, a classic baseball autobiography, talks about being a young kid. Bill Veeck himself was sort of hanging around the Cubs clubhouse and during this era, as his father, Bill Veeck Sr., was the general manager, helping Hack Wilson fight his way through a hangover, basically laying into a tub and 14-year-old Bill Veeck just carting buckets of ice back from the trainer's room into the tub to keep Hack modulated.
Well, so the famous story about Hack, right, which is probably bullshit, is which Wrigley would this have been? William?
PK. There's a William. Yeah, William,
Yeah.
the benevolent and brilliant owner.
He calls Hack into his office, and on his desk he's got a glass full of gin and a glass full of water, and he takes worms and he puts a worm in each glass, and the one in the water swims around, and the one in the gin immediately dies. And he just looks at Hack and says, "What does this tell you?" And Hack says, "As long as I keep drinking gin, I'll never get worms."
Yeah, and Hack Wilson, I remember if you could dig up some old Mike Royko articles. You talk about Ron Santo being the most famous. He was known for being the most overlooked omission from the Hall of Fame. Apparently, Hack Wilson was that of an earlier era, and Royko lamented the fact that Wilson eventually did get into the Veterans Committee, and he lamented it because he said, well, now that Wilson's in, people aren't going to talk about him anymore because apparently in the 70s, the only reason they talked about him was to make the case that he had been a hugely overlooked omission from the Hall of Fame, but he did get in.
Okay, next up, the alpha's a little weird. Philip K. Wrigley.
Yeah, the oddball, eccentric owner. And, really, you talk about points in history when franchises turn, like when Muggs Hallis died in 79, shifting the direction of the Bears towards the McCaskies. We've talked tonight already about these pennant winners because this is why we are so many of those guys like Kyler and Wilson and Charlie Root, are in the Hall of Fame. They had great players then. They competed every year for the pennant in those years. There was a team that William Veeck Sr. had built, and he was given free reign by William Wrigley, who was a gum magnet but absolutely loved baseball and threw all the resources at it. And William Wrigley unexpectedly dies, 1930, somewhere in the midst of that run. William Veeck Sr. would also die shortly after, which it was a double whammy. But William Wrigley's death was really set the course of the franchise to kind of almost where we're at, the next 80 years. it fell into the hands of his disinterested son. He was interested in making money and and running the gum company, not so interested in maintaining a pennant winner, which is why PK Wrigley failed to listen to Bill Veeck Jr.'s pleas when Bill Veeck Jr. had become a young man and was trying to get into the game himself and could not convince PK Wrigley to let him run the Cubs after Bill Veeck Jr.'s father had died. And it set a course for this franchise to go into that era that I talked about, the 50s, the first dark age. They had a blip of success with the DeRocher era, but really with the Cubs as the lovable losers as they've been defined, that was unheard of up until 1930, and by the mid to late 30s, that's the direction they were headed, and that's pretty much entirely due to that man, Philip P.K. Wrigley.
So on his plaque, he gets credit for being team president for pennants in 35, 38, and 45.
Incredible.
35 and 38 were still players that William had helped assemble. 45 was the war.
But right.
Browns played in the World Series in the 40s.
Right. As Royko would say, the only guys left were guys that were either too old or too enfeebled, which I just love that word. That were left behind. So the 45 team is almost asterisk worthy, but yeah. So riding the coattails. Right.
The story has always been that the Cubs were about to put lights up at Wrigley, and he donated the steel for the war effort.
And
why?
I think that's true too, to some degree.
40 years to finally find enough steel to put him up. I never quite understood.
One thing he did that I think the other owners thought was idiotic, and I don't know if I give him credit for it because I think it succeeded. I don't know what his motives were, but he put every Cub game on all four local channels in the 50s, and they sucked. But I kind of helped grow the fan base, which is like the opposite of Bill Wirtz and the Blackhawks, who didn't even let him be on pay cable till 10 years ago. So he was actually, and he kind of set the blueprint for Tribune Company too. That the 90s Tribune ownership, where he did invest in the ballpark. He ripped out a bunch of seats down the left field line where my seats are, to where now they can shift. Like if you ever went to Old Sox Park or a really old ballpark, if you sit down the line, the seats face like the right field wall, but modern ballparks, of course, shift it towards home. PK Wrigley, at great expense, did pull out all of those seats to sort of turn those seats on the left field line to face home plate. So he actually did invest a lot of money into that fan experience, which again makes him just the perfect sort of ancestral godfather of today's Cubs management and Tribune 2 Cubs management, because it was all about the fan experience. So I guess fans wouldn't complain, but the team itself, didn't really do anything. Just set the course for decades of woe. But obviously, it's a no-brainer to go in for better or worse.
Everybody's favorite Cub third baseman, Heine Zimmerman.
I remember hearing that name as a kid. Even before Don Zimmer's with the Cubs, like that was Zimmerman. Heine, what kind of a name? Yeah. I couldn't tell you anything about Heine Zimmerman. Was he on the 18 pennant winner, or he was on the 08, 09?
Yeah,
okay.
It was 7 and 8. He
okay. 7 and 8.
He won the Triple Crown in 1912.
All right.
372 with 14 homers and 104 RBIs.
And another dead ball.
41 doubles.
Yeah. So in one season. That's pretty good, even in the dead ball.
For Heine.
Yeah. I'm sure he wasn't teased for that name.
Now, the coolest player in Cub history.
Billy's pretty cool. He's still going, and he's still going strong. God bless. I'll be sad when Billy passes, but I'd be really shocked if it happens anytime soon. That motherfucker he's just vibing.
Sweet swinging Billy Williams.
Beautiful swing.
16 years with the Cubs. Ranked third in club history with 2,510 hits, 392 homers. He played in a then NL record 1,117 consecutive games, and we're not going to fucking talk about the guy who broke the record.
No, we're not.
A six-time All-Star. He won the National League batting title in 1972, and they rewarded him by shipping him off to Oakland so he could actually play in some playoff games. He was elected to the Hall of Fame and had his number retired by the Cubs at a game I was at in 1987.
Oh, cool. That's good. That's good stuff. I remember how upset my dad was when Williams kept getting cut short. Banks got in on first chance in '82, and Williams had to wait a little bit. Not like Santo, but I remember for about 3 or 4 years there was always a little bit of anxiety and then anger when he didn't get in. But he got in. He got in. He got in. So who cares if you get in right away? But yeah, for sure. God bless Billy Williams.
The one good owner in Cub history,
Right.
William Wrigley Jr.
Yeah, he really was. It's funny that PK was this kid, man, because this guy was a smart businessman. He started up this soap company, and then he kind of moves over to gum because it was selling. I mean, he was already wealthy. He just loved baseball, and he just knew to put the right people in charge, stand back. I think the legend is that Bill Veeck Sr. was a sports writer under the byline Bill Bailey. I could be wrong. It could have been somebody else. And this sounds totally apocryphal. It would never happen today in any event. But Bill Veeck Sr. peppering the owner about the state of the Cubs. And this was the sort of one of the rare periods at that point where they were, not dominating. And so Wrigley suggested something to the effect of, well, if you know that much about it, why don't you give it a shot? And offered him the job. And that kind of leads us, the segue right into Bill Veeck Sr. But
I was going to say he's followed here by the worst owner in Cub history, William Wrigley III, Bill.
Oh, I thought it was Bill Veeck. My bad.
No.
Bill Veeck Sr. Oh, yeah. So.
Oh, no, God forbid they put either the Vecks in. They're not going to find him on this list.
So he was only the owner for 5 years, William Wrigley. So he was the owner and we became fans, basically. But he was checked out. I think what happened was PK died, and then his widow died. His widow died shortly after, and the inheritance crushed. I mean, it could have crushed him. They own fucking worldwide brand in the gum company.
They chose not to pay the taxes.
That's what it was, and so that's how it shook out. And that's at least he sold them to William Wrigley III. Sold the Cubs to the Tribune Company, and that was the end of the Wrigley era. But it's funny. I guess you got to put him in, right? It's whatever. I mean, what the hell did he do? He was the owner for 5 years.
Right. They put the other two in. What the hell? Might as well put. This just feels like the Tribune throwing him a bone.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, you want to come to the hall?
I wonder if he's even alive. Not that anyone cares. I mean, if PK Wrigley didn't leave an impression on anybody himself, right? Even though he was the owner for years. I mean, rumor had it PK Wrigley would dress up in a funny nose and glasses and sit in the bleachers. He was just a weirdo. But his son was even less.
I pity the poor intern who had to come up with something to write on Bill's plaque. Here's what they came up with. He was part of a 66-year run of the Wrigley family's involvement with the Cubs before the team was sold to the Chicago Tribune in 1981. That's basically he had a long history of existence. Congratulations.
Yeah, and by the way, William Wrigley III died in 1999. He only lived 66 years. Really, nothing much to stand out except for a plaque in left field, which seems very cursory.
Next up, a guy inducted because he was Ron Santo's roommate. Glen.
Well, fuck, we already hit up Kessinger, so I don't know what more can be said here. It's just ridiculous. I've railed against this sort of nostalgia of the DeRocher era Cubs.
How did Gene Oliver get in?
Yeah, I mean, is there not a Paul Popovich shrine that we can pay homage to?
He won a Gold Glove.
One Gold Glove.
So I can't wait for Darwin Barney's induction. Honestly, Darwin probably a better player. A 4-time NL All-Star. For 7 years he had at least as many walks as strikeouts. Yeah, good for you, Glenn.
Yeah, wow. I mean, are we done with the boomer hour?
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it might be some surprises. Who knows? Maybe. I mean, Hundley's probably. We'll see. We'll see. I haven't gone through this.
Hey!
Yeah.
Jack Brickhouse, who, my one story I have about Jack Brickhouse is my aunt we saw her Thanksgiving one year, and she said it was a party, I saw Jack Brickhouse. Dad's like, oh, what was he like? I don't know, but he had a big boil on his neck.
Yes, I remember you told that story.
That's what Auntie remembered about Jack Brickhouse. I just have a feeling that had I been a Cub during Jack's heyday, he would have really annoyed me.
A Cub fan? Yeah, he did. He was not popular in my household. Yeah, he was not popular.
Jack.
He gets in because he was there forever. We put up with him, I think. I think fans put up. There might be some people that are nostalgic for him, but he did not have the personality of Harry Carey. I know, and if you talk to anybody that was around, whether they're like maybe a caddy somewhere where he golfed or any encounters with him, I guess he was always a bit of a prick. Not that that means anything, they're not always in the best situation to, interact. But of course you got to put Brickhouse. They've already honored him with the hey. But yeah, I just, in my household, Brickhouse was not very popular. Nobody shed a tear when he left, and we loved Harry. So it wasn't like we didn't like the broadcasters.
After Jack Brickhouse, Milo Hamilton. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Here's a great name. Outfielder from 1904 to 1916, Frank Wildfire Schulte.
Sure.
He was a slugging right fielder for the powerhouse Cubs of the early 1900s. First player in Major League history to reach at least 20 doubles, triples, home runs, and steals in the same season. It's kind of like
Sandberg in Sandberg in '84, right? Didn't Sandberg have that year like 40 doubles, 20 triples, 20 homers?
No, 19 triples.
Right, I know he almost got it.
Almost did it.
Okay, yeah, Schulte not a baseball fan, but he played on 4 pennant winners. So for this franchise, that's a straight shot.
Oh, here I want to give an update. I know who the second winningest left-hander in Cub history is.
Jamie Moyer?
No, but about the same. Here's a guy, his career record. 84 wins, 110 losses.
Did we watch him? Is he our era?
No. Dick Ellsworth.
Ah.
He's number 2.
Oh, my God.
His 84 wins, one more than current Cub ace, Kyle Hendricks.
Okay.
Next on the list for lefties, that actual good left-handed pitcher, Ken Holtzman.
Yeah.
80 and 81. So John Lester, who we joked about, 4th winningest left-hander in Cub
history.
77 wins.
Oh, my God.
4th most.
And you know what?
Lester. That's the Bears wide receiver of.
Well, and of course we're using a metric that means less and less as time goes on. What this does mean? It
used to mean a lot.
What it does mean is that Hippo Vaughn will, when we die, no one is going to catch Hippo now. He will always be the all-time left-handed leader.
Johnny Morris and Hippo Vaughn will always have a special spot in our hearts.
Oh, God help us if Johnny Morris's record can't be fucking eclipsed. But that's a great trivia question about Hippo Vaughn. If I'm ever a quiz master for a trivia game, I'm putting that one in. Cubs all-time leading left-hander in victories.
Next up, I should have waited a couple. I would have had a segue. But next up, Ed Rulebach.
Yeah,
1913.
Yeah, part of the rotation with Mordecai and Orville overall. Great pitcher and a great team. No brainer.
A cool stat about Ed Rulebach. He's the only pitcher in baseball history to throw 2 shutouts in one day.
Wow.
He threw shutouts in both ends of a doubleheader against Brooklyn on September 26, 1908.
I'm actually kind of surprised that's only happened that once, but all right.
Here's a guy that the Cubs wanted to honor so much that they spelled his name wrong. Orville overall. But on the pull-down list, he's Avril. Nice job. Morons. Orville,
wow.
84 and 43 with a 1.94 ERA in 6 years with the Cubs. He won 20 games in 07 and 09. And he was the Jake Arrieta of the 1908 World Series. He went 2-0. He earned the win in the decisive game.
He did.
Against Detroit.
He recorded it. So you can draw a line between Orville overall and Joe Borowski. Orville had recorded the last out. So Joe Borowski was the first Cub to record the final out in a series clinching game.
Wow.
Since Orville. So there you go.
It only took 95 years.
Yep.
I thought you were going to say that you could draw a line, because you can, between Orville overall and Mike Montgomery.
That too.
They are
yes.
Two Cubs to record the final out of a World Series, of a successful World Series.
And I'm going to assume that overall was a right-hander. Yeah,
he was. He was
86 wins.
Zip by on the list.
Okay.
Here's where I could have held my water and had a better segue. Ken Holtzman.
Yeah, he's right there. Yeah. Threw 2 no-hitters with the Cubs.
Jake. And then he
Yep, and
went on to pitch for the Padres in a game against the Rockies. No, that
and he got his tits lit up. Yeah, and on the '69 Cubs, I believe he went 9-0. That was that the year he went 9-0 because he was in the Army, and he would come. He could only pitch on weekends. So he was in the armed forces. He had one season with the Cubs where he was 9-0.
It's like
and then
it's like Dwayne Kuiper right now can only do Giants TV games on Saturdays and Sundays at home because it's the only time he's having chemo. It's the only time his doctors will let him do the games.
And they let him do it.
Really
That's
pissing
cool.
Dwayne off. I heard a podcast he was on, and he would like to work more, but
Sure. Yeah, and Holzer, I believe, was traded for Rick Monday, if I'm
it was
not mistaken.
1967. Yeah, he went 9-0.
Oh, 67, not 69.
2.53 ERA and 12 starts.
Okay.
In 69,
Wow.
he was 17-13. He won 17 games again in 70.
Yeah,
and
good
his
pitcher.
reward was by 1972 he was pitching for the A's
In the World Series, so they did him a favor. He got a ring.
And then he had a less than sterling run.
He came back to the Cubs, I believe. I don't know if he got his. I thought he may have come back at the end, but
he did.
Rather
Just
insignificant.
his final two seasons, 78 and 79 for the Cubs, he won a combined 6-12.
Yeah, well, it is a Cub tradition, like no other pitchers come back.
Yeah, he got traded.
It was Rick Monday, right?
76. I was looking at it. He spent half the year with Baltimore and half the year with the Yankees.
Okay.
I remember that his Yankee career didn't go very well.
Yeah, no, Cubs and A's where he had success.
The Rebel.
Well, if
Randy Hundley.
If you're going to put Kessinger and Beckert, and come on, everyone knows Randy Hundley, lives in the area still. And we still like Randy, even though we hated his son. Even his son couldn't ruin Randy's legacy.
That's how good Randy was. Or not how good, but that's how likable he was. That even though his coked up kid, although it turned out fine because it turned into Mark Grudzielanek and Eric Karros.
That's right. In the end.
Which I do think probably blunted the hatred for Todd.
Probably.
It's like, we didn't have to put him in that long, and we got two pretty useful players out of him, so whatever. Go.
Yeah. And, Hundley was, I don't know if he ever made an all-star team, but it's a low bar, like we said, with catchers.
He was an all-star one time. 1969. Go figure. And
heaven forbid he get a break that season. Because there was a 3-year period where DeRocher just pretty much caught him at 150 games. It was rough.
Appeared in at least 149 games in 4 straight seasons, which is just asinine.
Yeah, especially for and the Cubs at this point
are the daytime.
Yeah, they're 20 years going on the only team that plays all their games during the day. So you'd think you'd mitigate against that. As it was, I'd say between Hartnett and Contreras, Hundley and Jody Davis are probably right next. And he's probably top 5 for the Cubs, maybe a low bar because there haven't been that many. But again, Hundley would be the type of guy I would say that this type of Hall of Fame would be designed for.
And he is well known for his fantasy camp. He started basically the trend.
Yeah.
And right now, when you watch the Cubs, it looks like they're having it during the regular season.
Maybe I could be out there.
The Romine brothers jacking around on the field. It's great. It's awesome.
Who would have thought that the Cubs would be recruiting from Randy Hundley's fantasy camp? But it serves as a reservoir apparently.
Next guy, one of 2 great Canadian pitchers that played for the Cubs. It's not Ryan Dempster. It's the other one, Ferguson.
Yeah, and we got to experience Fergie too, which wasn't that bad. He was actually still pretty good second time around, but obviously his induction is based on just a really stellar, incredible, one of the greatest performances for a 6-7 year period. He ranks up there with Mordecai. I mean, really, he's arguably one of the best starting pitchers in Cubs history. Because those pennant winners in the 20s and 30s had a lot of good pitchers, but not no Hall of Famers. Fergie was one of the best pitchers in the game. So
he between 1967 and 1972, he threw at least 20 complete games every year, He led the league in complete games with 20 and 67, 24 and 70, 30 and 71, and 29 in 1974. He did it again. Oh, sorry, 74 was with Texas. He did it again in 75 with Texas. He led the National League in innings in 1971 with 325. And
Wow.
there was a time when there were only two pitchers in baseball history who had more than 3,000 strikeouts while allowing less than 1,000 walks.
I thought Fergie was the first.
He was. And the second
And then Maddox joined him.
was also number 31 for the Cubs,
Yes.
Greg Maddux.
Yes.
And
Also pitched for the Cubs twice.
Kurt Schilling has since joined them. So,
Okay.
But,
The thing about Maddox, though, and I'm sure he's. Oh, we'll wait till we get to Maddox. I'll bring it up since we mentioned. We'll come back. But yeah, tip my hat to Fergie.
I don't. Are we gonna? Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, we're almost done with this era. As the last guy of the old folks era, Old Hoss, Rig Stevenson.
Didn't even know that was his nickname, but yep, that would be my grandpa Donahue's favorite ball player. Part of those much discussed. Who knew that? Remember, this crap could reach back to the, to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt era, Herbert Hoover. But Stevenson, very much a part. I don't know if he was on all four of those teams like Charlie Root was, but he was again not a baseball Hall of Famer, above average player for a while, and a central piece to this perennial contender that was much celebrated. Teammates with Kai and Gabby. Good old Riggs Stevenson.
Yeah, best number 5 in Cub history, other than Chuck Cottier.
Right. How dare you dismiss Albert Almora like that, my friend?
Third base coach. No.
Chuck Cotty.
All right. Now, we're gonna have some repeats here. I gotta do work now. When you go to the new era. All right. Let's see.
Well, what do you follow? Because I've been following along with you, but I'm looking at just like the plaques. Ever Stevenson, I see like Russia. So they did it by era, or is that what it is?
A few more mixed in, so I'll have to. But
okay.
Next up is Big Daddy himself,
the whale,
Rick Russia.
Used to bag a deer or two on your dad's property. I remember you told that story.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Loved Russell. He was probably for you too. The first 8 when the Cubs became part of our consciousness. That was the guy. Had been for a few years. Russell, and they dealt him in '81, gave him a chance to go to the World Series, and then he kind of got injured, and then came back and really blew out his arm, but then had a weird renaissance after the Cubs helped him rehabilitate, and then he pitched against the Cubs in a rare postseason that we discussed in '89.
Mustache.
Yes, right, when he came back.
Yeah,
honestly, borderline baseball Hall of Famer. I know there's no pitching equivalent of Harold Baines, but Russell did win 200 games, pitched for a long time, and, no-brainer for this, for sure. But, yeah, we love the whale. Another guy that pitched for the Cubs and came back. Great athlete, too, for a fat guy.
Cubs announcer from 1982 to 1997, Harold Carabina, Harry Carey.
Yeah. Again, part of that, he ushered in with Dallas Green and the Tribune Company, whole new identity. The hell with Jack Brickhouse and his weirdness. Harry Carey really brought excitement to it, man. And it was right at a point where the whole country was being electrified by cable television, and it was a perfect time for him to become like the sort of national presence that he was. And and of course, it worked both ways, as we talk about, whether it's Will Ferrell or Ryan Dempster often caricatured Harry in the final years. But, we remember the early years, especially 82 till his stroke in 87. He was just a crackerjack broadcaster. I don't know what more you can say. Just so much fun to listen to, so honest, so into it, and, just made the games exciting even when the product on the field wasn't.
Yep, Harry was great. He could not and would not hide his disgust at poor play, which did not insult the fans by pretending that what you were watching wasn't shit. Which is something that does not happen enough.
Not nowadays. As much as I love Virgil Patrick Hughes, he often sometimes goes into a little propaganda mode. Harry would never deign to do that. No, sir. So, much deserved.
Next guy on the list is a Hall of Famer. He was an MVP. He won 9 Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers. He was a 10-time All-Star. Ryan D. Sandberg.
That's DEE, kids. That was his middle name.
DEE.
Strange. Yeah, probably the greatest player whose entire career was basically with the Cubs that you and I witnessed, or at
Yeah,
least the
except for
first.
those. What he had
As we
a
get older,
handful of games with the Phillies, right?
yes. As we get older, we're gonna, yeah. Who knows what the future brings? I mean, Sosa would be a guy that would almost fit that bill. He was basically we saw his whole career, legitimate Hall of Famer. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's a slam dunk.
Well, and Chris Bryant, he'll
Well, that's the thing. I was going to
that's
say,
right.
like, there might be a.
Traded him.
I
How about
stopped
Tommy Pham?
myself
No, how you
because
doing?
in my head I was like,
Anthony
well, there's going to be
Rizzo. Traded Anthony Rizzo.
there's going to be a whole new, coterie of players now. And then I stopped. I'm like, well, I mean, they'll all be in the Cubs Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
Of course, because they
Brennan
won the
Davis.
World Series.
That's the only guy we have left. Is Brennan Davis. He will. Oh boy.
Because there's nobody in between Sammy and the current era, right? Because they're always swapping guys. I mean, Derek Lee. I mean, nobody who really was like a guy that comes up and you see him struggle, and then you see him, and you see him do incredible things, and then he struggles at the end. But you saw the whole arc. Sandberg probably fits it more to a T for anybody of our generation than anybody else.
1984 Cy Young Award winner, the Red Baron.
Yeah, no brainer. Yeah, and not just because of what he did in '84, which is almost Arrieta-esque. Although I would think what Arrieta did in 2015 would exceed it slightly, but what Sutcliffe did was incredible. Leads the Cubs to the postseason for the first time in 39 years. Goes 16-1 after being acquired midseason, but then he did. It wasn't just that. He stuck around through the '91 season. He was their opening day starter every season through '89. Almost won the Cy Young again in '87, narrowly missing out to Steve Bedrosian, and injured a lot, star-crossed. I'm sure he won. How many did he win with the Cubs? Only 82. I would have thought he would have won 100. But for '84, and then just sort of being the anchor, he was on the '89 team too. He got a start in that series, so the rarity of a Cub being on two different playoff teams, especially then. He was almost a little, in some ways, just a little bit behind Sandberg.
Yeah, the 16-1 with a 2.69 ERA and basically 2/3 of a season.
Yeah, it was nuts.
I think so. The second half of 2015 might very well be the best anyone has ever pitched
in history.
Look at Jake's numbers, and they're god awful ridiculous.
It felt like it at the time. I'll tell you that.
Which is why he should have never come back. But
I know.
He never came back.
I'll be able to suppress it. I'm good at that.
Get your pencils and scorecards ready. Pat Piper is in the Hall of Fame.
Deserved. The Wayne Messmer of his era. I don't think he sang the anthem before the games, but he was the PA announcer. And the thing that cracks me up just picturing, I don't know if I've even seen a picture of it, is that in this era, and he stretches, he touches from 1917 to 74. Goodness, that's
actually more than that. He was a vendor for the Cubs starting in 1904. He spent 70 years with the Cubs.
That's an epoch. But he, as a PA announcer, he sat on the field, if I'm not mistaken, like on a stool directly behind home plate against the brick wall with almost like a comically oversized cone.
Yeah, he had an original megaphone, not the kind with the little speaker in it. He was just yelling into basically a traffic cone, and having it. Like 800 people could actually hear him. It's like, oh, that's great.
Well, luckily for him, especially in the 50s, that would have meant that all the fans could hear him. Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense.
Bill Buckner.
Absolutely, probably my first favorite. I think he's your first favorite.
Yep, I love Bill Buckner.
Yeah, we both did. Great player, led the league in hitting in 1980. The first in our life of that long line of just really good defensive first baseman, really good hitter. Yeah, that's again, this is the kind of thing. He's the kind of player for whom this thing would be created. Cub for about 7 years.
His eyebrows were so thick it looked like he had two more mustaches just over each eye.
Yeah, they're spares.
Yeah, I mean honestly, if he wore eye black, he would get accused of playing in blackface because everything would be covered in something that was black. Yeah, he played for the Cubs for 8 years. He had 300 on the nose. In 8 seasons with the Cubs, Bill Buckner struck out 159 times.
Wow, that's better than Mark Grace. Very similar hitter to Grace.
Well, because I think he didn't walk. That was the weird thing. He only walked 187 times.
So his on base wasn't that high.
Right,
as much as it was driven by just his ability to get hits. I didn't know that he didn't have a high on base. So Grace was probably better in that regard because you brought up some Grace stats where even in the 80s it was kind of incredible how infrequently he struck out. Yeah. Buckner was similar.
So it's pretty crazy. I mean, now guys strike out 159 times, season without blinking.
Well, like we said, the game's different. We've just covered a whole slew of pitchers that would throw 1,000 pitches an inning, or 1,000 pitches a season.
You can't have a Hall of Fame without somebody to clean it up. Cubs clubhouse attendant Yosh Kawano.
Now, how many Hall of Fame plaques do you think have guys just wearing a wife beater? That's what I want.
And a bucket hat. He looks good.
We all know Yosh. Yosh probably would not have been elevated to this if it had not been for Arnie Harris and WGN, sort of making him a little bit of a local celebrity, which is fun. I just remember like being a kid watching a game and like the camera would catch him standing like outside like the door in the left field corner, kind of peeking out, and then either Harry or Jack Brickhouse can go, "Hey, there's Yosh," and then kind of give him his 5 minutes there.
Yosh is like, "Could you hurry this shit along a little? Come on, some of us got lives. Yeah. We don't need to be here the whole time." The picture that they have on the plaque, he's leaning up against the door, and the look on his face is basically, it looks like he's looking into the clubhouse, and it's like, would you fuckers just pick up your towels?
Yeah.
Would it kill you? Me. Just pick it. It's right there. Just pick it up. I shouldn't have to go around and pick up everybody's towel.
And then didn't Yosh have a brother that was like the longtime equipment guy for the Dodgers, right? Yeah. And I think he lived long enough to see the Cubs win the World Series, but I think dementia had sort of begun to eat away at him. So it says he retired in 2008. So it's quite because for a while I think he was like the trivia question when the Cubs went to the playoffs in '84. Like, who's the one guy that was still part of the 45 Cubs? Yosh Kawano, because he started in '43.
Next up, the good kid.
The good kid.
Boudreaux.
Local hero, South Suburbs. I think he played basketball at Thornwood too. Won a World Series as another player manager.
World Series, the last World Series the Indians have ever won.
1948 confounded Ted Williams also in 40. I think to get to the World Series in 48, they had to beat the Red Sox in a 3-game square-off so they could play the other Boston team, the Braves. And I think a lot of teams put the shift on Williams, but I think Boudreaux gets some credit.
He gets all the credit.
In that series, I think a lot of teams did it more than we thought, but Boudreaux was definitely, and he was a young guy, like in 40, not young, but 48. He wasn't like, he was an everyday player. He won the MVP in 48. He had a great season. He might have been their fucking shortstop. There's the shortstop, he's MVP, he's the manager. I know that's for Cleveland, but yeah, and he shuts down Ted Williams and wins the World Series. And Cleveland, I mean, he better damn well be in the Cleveland Guardians Hall of Fame.
I can't imagine he's not.
For that season alone, but for the Cubs, he is a local guy, and then you and I know Lou because he was the voice on the radio along with Vince Lloyd when we started listening to games, whether it was Jack or Harry on TV. I mean, Vince and Lloyd were there they were there in '84 actually. Boudreaux was broadcasting games to the late '80s, and he was pretty good. Yeah. Actually, he did his homework. I remember.
He's in the real Hall of Fame.
He is. It might be questionable there though, as far as the course of his career. I don't know what kind of a war he has, but
and he managed the Cubs for part of one season.
He was one of the college coaches too, yeah.
In 1960, and that 1960 was the year that they fired Charlie Grimm and had Charlie replace Lou in the booth and had Lou replace Charlie as the manager. That's how they were running things.
Well, that's PK Wrigley. Yep.
I got to pay both of them. We might as well have them.
and I apologize for besmirching Lou. He had a 63.6 WAR. That puts you sort of in. That's pretty much Hall of Fame inarguable. I don't know what people consider. All I know is that Harold Baines is 38.7. But yeah, good kid. Definitely belongs in the Cub Hall of Fame.
That brings us to the final member, other than we didn't get to Margaret Donahue.
No, and a few others I see, but yeah.
Oh, is there more? Because
I see.
Look like I'm on the last.
Well, yours. I wonder if they're like maybe they're editing this and like correcting the spelling and overall because you had sort of bounced around a little bit from what I had, but I'll tell you who I have left. Otherwise,
it used to be called the Hawk. Now it's just the Undertaker. Andre Dawson.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Anybody in our generation, he's in your Mount Rushmore of Cubs. I think, especially growing up, came to the Cubs almost a little bit past his prime, at least defensively, because of his knees. I shouldn't say past his prime. He won a fucking MVP, and he was a badass for a while. But he wasn't he was such a tremendous center fielder with Montreal. If he didn't have, if he wasn't playing on that concrete Olympic Stadium or didn't have genetically bad, he could have been an all-timer for sure. I know he's a little bit of a controversial Hall of Famer, kind of in the Jim Rice category. Certainly, absolutely 100% Cub Hall of Famer.
Yes. Yeah, 174 homers in 6 years. Obviously, 87 he led the National League in homers and RBIs. He won five-time. He was a five-time NL All-Star with the Cubs.
Yeah.
Won two Gold Gloves with the Cubs and was elected into the Hall of Fame in 2010.
He was only with the Cubs for 6 seasons, I want to say. So 5 out of 6 years, he was a Hall of Fame. He was an All-Star. So yeah, just great right fielder, great arm, just all around. Played on a playoff team. A lot of good memories.
All right, so who did I miss?
Leo the Lip.
Oh yeah, where is?
Yeah, DeRocher, all timer. Basically, I think I'm in the process of rethinking my idea of Leo DeRocher's legacy with the Cubs because I'm almost starting to think he was probably the worst, not a good manager to have had for those teams. If you got 4 Hall of Famers, how do you not win the pennant? I mean, you could say, well,
here's more. Okay.
I mean, DeRocher, he did turn the franchise around after that dark age. I mean, by the time I remember my dad being so relieved, and he didn't even care it was DeRocher. He was to get rid of that college of coaches. At that point, the Cubs were going on 20 years of just embarrassing play after never having that kind of a history prior. They do turn it around, but who's to say they don't turn it around based on regardless of who the manager was? They had talent coming up. They had Banks, who was getting old, but they had Williams and Sano in their prime. They had Jenkins. Bill Hands won 20 games. The one criticism I know about DeRocher 69 is that he relied on nobody but his starters. Right, that Paul Popovich was the only guy on the bench, and
Randy Hummels. He wouldn't use very many guys out of the bullpen. He wore that team out.
Yeah, he wore them out, and they were playing day games. He didn't take that into account. I mean, you could win playing day games. Jim Fry did in '84. You got to take it into account, is all. And he rode them into the ground. So I don't know. Kudos to Leo for making the Cubs interesting for the first time in 2 decades, and then also shit, you really sort of beat that whip. That horse was dead.
Was it '69 that he left for a few days and went on his honeymoon?
Yeah, was that 60? Yeah, which is weird. Yeah, he was. He's certainly an all-time character in history. Just volatile. Babe Ruth hated him because he was a shitty hitter, and he kind of brought the Yankees down. But he was a scrappy ball player. He was on the Gas House gang, so he's almost like a little bit of a Walter Mitty or like a Forrest Gump in baseball. He's on teammates with Ruth, and he's on the Gas House gang, and he ends up with Brooklyn, and then he famously leaves them for the Giants, and he was a character, and so he came to the Cubs as an old man, almost like Lou Piniella, and got him close, fell short. And now we're dealing with a generation of baby boomers that are putting Don Kessinger and his single-digit WAR into this exhibit. So I guess that's something. Go ahead.
Cubs closer from 1976 to 1980, Bruce Sutter.
Just incredible. I mean, when I came of age, he was at the peak. So he was just a white light when I was a kid. He was phenomenal. He in four consecutive All Star games, Suter got a win, and a save and a save. The last one being with St. Louis in '82. But in 3 straight years with the Cubs, crappy Cubs teams. He factors into the All Star game. Eventual Hall of Famer, best known probably for the homer he gave up to Sandberg as a Cardinal, but uh, just when he burst onto the scene with a split-fingered fastball that nobody had seen, he was an absolute spectacle, and certainly worthy.
So I always assumed the Cubs traded him because they were cheap. They didn't
They
want to
were
pay him.
because he beat them in arbitration the year before.
Yeah. So
They
he
were
went
up
to the
there.
Cardinals, and they had the goods. They let him go at just the right time because his
They
signed his
did.
contract with the Braves, and he was not.
Yes, yes.
He basically his arm was shot by then.
Cardinals got one World Series out of him, so it was worth it for them. And yeah, career. He managed to save 300 games. He was the first. I mean, relievers have kind of been a thing, I guess, since the Second World War, maybe the '60s more accurately. Jerome Holtzman invents the save in '69. You had guys like Raleigh Fingers, Sparky Lyle won a Cy Young in '76. Gossage was known as the Yankees, but Suter, as far as counting, he just started racking up saves, taking advantage of that stat. He may have been I think Fingers did get to 300. Suter might have been second. But he was one of the first early great closers, and he did a lot of that work with some mediocre Cubs teams.
The newest member of the Cubs Hall of Fame, Margaret Donahue.
And Midge.
Margaret broke the barrier for women in sports as Major League Baseball's first female officer outside of team ownership. Hired as a stenographer with the Cubs in 1919, she was promoted to corporate secretary in 26, and in 1950 to vice president and secretary. So clearly
Wow.
PK made that job up for her. A post she held
Right.
until her retirement in 1958. And the picture they have of her, it looks like she's wearing like Amelia Earhart's
Is she a
leather,
flapper? Is that a flapper?
but that's her hair. That's she's a looker, Margaret Donahue.
Yeah,
I guess for the Cubs for
good
recognition.
old Aunt Midge. And good for PK Wrigley again. Like eccentric, didn't help the team at all. So negative there. Big on the fan experience, and I guess kudos for him for having some progressive foresight, thinking outside the box. And apparently, she had invented the concept of the season ticket. I don't know if that's true or not. I read that earlier today,
Yeah.
and and I think it may have even been Bill Veeck Sr. and William Wrigley that had brought her on. It said that she was promoted to corporate secretary in 26. She must have been an interesting person in those times to be climbing up the ranks there, and a team that was winning. So, she. I'd like to know more about my Aunt Midge, frankly, and based on what we know, I think that's a pretty neat inclusion. I'm cool with that.
William Hulbert, who we learned in the A.G. Spalding plaque, co-wrote the National League Constitution.
Yeah,
Um, he was the president of the Chicago Baseball Club. He was also the president of the National League in 1877 until his death in 1882. So he would have been the president of the Orphans or the Whales or whatever the hell they were
yeah,
back then.
yeah. Chicago National League Ball Club.
All right, now we're down to the last two Cubs to be inducted into the real Hall of Fame, and they are the last two members of the Cub Hall of Fame.
That's
My
right.
favorite pitcher of all time, my beloved Greg Maddux.
So the stat that I wanted a quick Google search might yield it, but as you mentioned, Andy, he was the second. I mean, the parallels are pretty hilarious, but he was the second pitcher to retire with over 3,000 strikeouts and fewer than 1,000 walks. Fergie being the first one, and it's funny because they both pitched for the Cubs. They both wore 31. They both left the Cubs and came back. With Fergie, it was one thing. With Maddux, it was kind of a heartbreak because he left in his prime, and we've hashed that over. But about that 1,000 walk thing was, I want to say that Maddux had reached 900. He finished with 999.
999.
And I'm pretty sure that he achieved 999 with about 6 more starts or so left in his career, something like that.
Hey, you read that on Decipio. Somewhere, I actually went and did the math
That's
as to
it.
how many batters that little bastard faced with 999 walks, and you know damn well he knew he had 999 walks.
And he's old.
And I even looked at how many 3-ball counts he got in at one point.
Can you recall it offhand?
No.
Okay.
I could try to find it. I've mentioned it a couple of times on this.
It might be worth reposting because it's such a fascinating thing. Because he was at the end of his career, so he's old too, and he doesn't want to just give up homers too. So he's got to really be cerebral in his approach.
Yeah, I mean you get all the. He's the guy who you really want him to write a book, and he's never going to do it because instead somebody should write a book where they find other people to tell stories about Greg, because some of the stuff, some of it we've talked about. The home run he gave up to Jeff Bagwell with the Astros, and then he was winning 8-0, and Javi Lopez says to him something like, "Well, that was a tough break. That he lost the shutout," and he's like, "Lost the shutout?
No, he gained so much more."
He gave that home run on purpose,
right? The time the umpire fucked him on a ball to Vladimir Guerrero, for which he'd been setting him up for 3 years. Yep. And how angry he was that he'd spent all that time preparing for that moment.
He called for all the pitches of a Frank Castillo shutout from the Cub dugout. He would famously tell guys in the dugout to move, and then the next pitch would get fouled where they were sitting in the dugout, because he could tell by the batter's swing, and he knew what pitch was coming up next, that if the hitter was just a little bit late, they were going to rifle it right into the dugout. I mean, and this is shit that didn't just happen once. People tell stories about this like it used to happen all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the bookend. Well, not really the bookend, because he even went after the Cubs the second time. We all know that.
Yeah, he traded himself for Cesar Torres.
That's right. But even if his best years were in Atlanta, but his stats would probably still rank with the Cubs, because he did. I mean, he burst. His breakout season was 88, and he won. That's when he started his 15 wins per season streak. So that's 5 years that he had with the Cubs. He had 5 really good years, and then he had a couple good years in the back end. So 7-8 years that were above average is good enough for most teams. I'm not just ripping on the Cubs, but you get a 7 or 8 year run with what he did. That usually ranks. But then
Scott Boras always insists that the Cubs, and they had an agreement, and Stanton Cook told who would have been the general manager at the time.
Larry Himes
told him that was too much and to go back with a different offer, and Boras said, "Fuck you," and they went to the Yankees, and the Yankees had actually made the highest offer, but Greg didn't want to pitch for the Yankees, so the Braves got close, and Greg went to pitch for the Braves.
It was probably his destiny. I mean, they had great pitchers down there. It's just So
Leo Mazzoni, I always like to tell a story about towards the end of his Braves career, after a game, Greg walked over to Leo and handed him a ball. And he's like, "What is this?" And he's like, "It's the ball for my 300th win." And Leo's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, if you take my regular season wins and my playoff wins, today was my 300th win." He goes, "I don't know why the hell playoff wins don't count. They're harder to get."
Yeah.
So he had already celebrated his 300th win long before he got his 300th
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because, I guess it is not fair to good pitchers on shitty teams that don't go to the playoffs, but it's still, you're right. We've always separated that.
So the final member of the Cubs Hall of Fame, Lee Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
He is still the Cubs' all-time leader in saves with 180.
180 is the mark, huh? So Studo didn't get there. Randy Myers was only there 3 years. Okay.
No, it's out there waiting for Manny Rodriguez. For the Man Rod, who has one, I think.
Smith
179 more.
Smith started saving games in 81 and kind of took over in 82 and 83. I remember him being really dominant. And he started trying to work in a slider. Sometimes it would cost him. He was still really effective, 84, 85. Gave up the homer to Garvey. We know that. But, he was really only the closer for 6 years. Yeah, I want to see probably averaged about 30 saves a season. Yeah, and he's a baseball Hall of Famer, right? He finally got in?
Yep.
Yeah, Lee Smith. He would supposedly sleep in the clubhouse for the first 6 innings of every game. Or like hearing a story where Johnny Oates yelled at him once before, realizing years later that's just how he was.
Yeah.
Send some kid over to McDonald's to get us a couple cheeseburgers before he'd warm up. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Cubs traded him um, because Jim Fry didn't like him. He'd been his closer in '84, and he just didn't like him, probably because of the sleeping thing. But he'd pitched 8 years in the big leagues, and he was washed up. He was going to be done. So you don't
Yeah,
want to just let's
yeah.
get something for him. Let's get Al Nipper and Calvin Schiraldi for him. That's all you need. That'll be fine. Um, so then he only goes on to pitch 10 more seasons
Yep.
and save 298 more games.
So he had over 400 then, 470,
478, which was at the time he retired the most.
because Hoffman was still pitching. So Hoffman and Rivera have both passed him, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
That's my guess. Yeah. So I think Hoffman and Rivera are the only two with 500. Um, but he got more at the Cubs than with any other team.
Yeah, the closest was, in 8 years he had 180 saves for the Cubs. In 4 years he had 160 for the Cardinals.
Wow. Wow, yeah, he actually, because he got dealt to the Red Sox, and then he ended up resurfacing with the Cardinals, and he had a really good second act with St. Louis. Those were not good Cardinals in our lifetime. It was one of the rare periods where the Cardinals were not in contention, but not for it wasn't Lee Arthur Smith's fault.
Yeah, he had his best years for the Cubs and the Cardinals. He was okay for the Red Sox. Um, the Cubs and the Cardinals are the only teams that he had an ERA under 3 for.
Okay.
He had 340 of his 478 saves in those 12 years. The other 6 years he had the rest. Um, in his last year, no, I guess last year as last year as full time closer, he had 37 saves for the Angels in '95.
Okay. I remember him pitching against the Cubs for the Expos in '97
That,
in a game.
that was
I think that was his last season, I
last
think.
year. And he had 5 saves for them
Wow.
in 25 appearances. He was 39 years old. He once threatened to quit the Cubs. He was going to go play basketball.
He's a big man.
Nobody's really sure where he was going to go play basketball. He was going to go play basketball. Um, and he couldn't see real well, especially when it started to get dark at Wrigley. So he did a lot of squinting, which I don't
Yeah.
think made batters feel real
No.
comfortable.
Well, especially in the pre-lights era. And when Dallas Green, and we'll talk about this, we have plenty of years in the '80s to talk about. But another one of the features that this whole thing ushered in 1982 with Tribune ownership and Dallas Green and Harry Carey and the fan club and retiring numbers, and was Dallas Green started scheduling games at 3:05, and I think that was his way of laying the groundwork for night games. But 3:05 in a ballpark without lights that you can turn on to kill some of the shadows. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine a game at 6 o'clock, end of the game, and here's Lee Smith. It's like bright sunshine, squinting like he's Mr. Magoo. He can't see anything, and it's not going to make a pitcher or a hitter too comfortable digging in the batter's box, I would think.
So the way this Hall of Fame was, I mean, let's call it what it was, slapped together.
With the typos and the Don Kessingers.
This was the easy part for the Cubs. Now, starting next year, when you have to come up with actual classes, you're going to have to answer the question every year until you do it. Where the fuck is Sammy Sosa? He's not under this thing. He was not eligible.
There's a stipulation, right, which was not articulated in their thing with the 5 years.
Well, the only people they put in after when Sammy would have been able to get were the 5 Hall of Famers, and then a special exemption for Margaret. So right now they can easily say, well, no, we haven't had to make that decision yet. But starting whenever they induct more people, which I'm sure they intend to do annually, that's going to start the question as to where's Sammy.
Yes. Well, it's going to be.
And if they have any brains at all, which we know they don't, you just put him in next time, and you
of
get
course.
it over with, and you never have to deal with it again. But they won't. They will.
You don't think so? I think they will. I actually think
to do that. They won't do it.
Why?
Oh no! And they'll have to put up with that crap.
So they're gonna because Mark Grace is the one that's everyone's gonna be begging for. They're gonna bring in Grace, but not Sosa.
I mean, given their track record of screwing things up, taking easy things and screwing them up, I would guess they won't put him in.
Well, they've done it for so long on Sosa that you'd think they'd eventually figure, because they really have. I mean, I know Sam is a little bit complicated. I have my own sort of complicated thoughts about him because I'm not all in on him overall. But he was, if you're talking about a Hall of Fame, how do you like talk about the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
The guy's got more fucking home runs than Babe. I don't care about the story. It's like you have to deal with that. You can't just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah. You can't. He was your best player
Meal
for
ticket.
what,
I would say
a
best player for
decade?
10, yeah, close to a decade, sure. Whether he'd share that with like Sandberg and yeah, it was mostly him. Yeah,
Well, there was a
Sandberg and
time
Grace.
once Sandberg retired the first time. Sammy
Well,
was
yeah,
it.
well, Grace was
Yeah,
still
Grace was a good player,
producing,
but
but Grace,
Sammy
but
was
Grace,
Sammy
no,
was a star, the
yeah,
only one
and
they had.
Sammy started taking off in '96. Yeah, 90 between '96 and '03 for sure. No doubt, that's a significant period of time. It's multiple playoff teams. The guy did things in the playoffs. I mean, the other night, just randomly, I looked up that home run against Urbina. I mean, that is one of the most iconic home runs in Cubs history, and it happened in a huge moment.
Yep.
I don't know what else you can say. And again, I'm not a Sammy stan. Like I could,
No, I'm not
and
either.
I've done it,
I
and we've
liked
pointed
Sammy.
out his weaknesses. Right? It's not. We're not. I'm just waving a flag. It's just objectively speaking, how do you avoid that? How do you can't pretend it didn't happen? It's ridiculous.
No, and you make a far bigger mess by not doing it than by just doing it.
Yeah. Well, it'll be funny if you're right. I don't. I think even these dumbasses have to stumble ass backwards into the right decision here because you have to whatever their agenda is, and I can't even imagine what it was. I don't. He didn't wrong them. I don't think that they have some sort of a moral sense of wrong due to performance enhancing drugs that would. I mean, I just don't get. Maybe they just don't know how to deal with how complicated it is.
Well, if they don't put
They're-
Sammy in, how are
they-
they going to put Glen Allen Hill in? And you know they want to put
uh,
Glen Allen Hill in. But it'll be interesting. I mean, they'll have some interesting. Sammy's a no brainer. Whether they really have no brains and they don't put him in right away, I don't get. But there are, obviously Grace
Grace is a
he
no-brainer.
goes in next year. Um, and then
Yeah, I mean,
how long are they going to wait? Like
right.
If John Lester retires after this season,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
put
Well,
him in.
there's a whole World Series, but there are other guys that like meet a minute. Like a John Lieber might have a case in
Yeah.
my book. I'm a John Lieber fan, but so I mean, so if you're talking about guys that played in the '90s. Derek Lee, Aramis Ramirez,
Yeah,
both
those are
no
they go in.
brainers. Um,
Kerry Wood is
and
going to go in.
Kerry Wood with a bullet, of course. That's a no brainer. Of course, Dempster's going to weasel his way in.
I was sure he was going to be in this thing. And it's going to be, and I wasn't kidding about it. It's going to be the bullshit. He's the only Cub in history to have 50 saves and 50 wins. That's not a thing.
and
No, who cares? That's not a thing. That's not a lot of either.
no,
It's just a
it's not.
coincidence that he did both for one team.
Yeah,
If you retire with, I think it's like 87 saves, and I mean it's more than that. It's not. It's
mine
it's not a lot. He was not good. He was okay. He had a couple
does.
of good years, but he didn't do enough to deserve the anything he's
Would,
gotten, and certainly not this.
would Soriano get him?
They
I would say he
should. I don't
should.
know if they'll. I don't know if they'll put him in.
It was his acquisition that led to them making back-to-back postseason appearances for the first times in 100 years.
Yeah. So this is 87 saves and 67 wins.
Jesus
That's
Christ.
nothing. Big fucking deal.
And just no attention to like the two nut punching blown saves in two separate seasons that knocked them out of the playoffs. I mean, just yeah, fine, just get it over with if that's what you're going to do. But certainly not the next class. So, yeah, we don't know. Do they have a limit? Is there going to be 5 a year? Because like I think now they got it, and I didn't see it articulated, but it seems to be, outside of the exceptions like Ant Midge and ball players that have already been elected into the Hall of Fame, that it's they put a cap on players whose careers began in the '90s. It seems like. So now if they're going to lift that,
Well,
now the question
basically,
is,
if you didn't get in as a player before they did this thing in '98, whenever they claimed they were doing it, which we didn't even know they were doing,
right,
then you had to be a Hall of Famer. Since then,
Yes,
to
I
get in
got
the,
it.
to get in
Okay.
this inaugural thing. So
Okay.
that was their way around Sammy and Grace and all that stuff.
Right. They didn't need a way around Grace because they have no problem embracing him. It was Sammy that gave them
Yeah,
that bought them some time.
this was all to avoid having to have the Sammy
Yeah.
conversation.
They
And you
can't
could
they
say
can't
it,
wait.
it may have been easier for them to have simply put him in right now with just the whole mess.
True.
Just put him
If
in and
if they had any self
do a
awareness and
little.
knew,
Hey, sorry because of COVID, Sammy, but here, get on Zoom. You can talk to the reporters and give a little speech, and then we're done. They didn't do that.
yeah, yeah, if considering all they put into the nostalgia part of it and all the investments into Wrigley Field, if they're really looking to milk all of their fans, and there are generations of fans that are unapologetic, Sammy, like kids that were 10 years old in 1998, right? I mean, there's a whole wave of people that they could appeal to
Yep.
by doing that, and I think they just can't figure it out
So
how because they're fucking
I would
stupid.
expect next year's class is Mark Grace, Chip Carey. Uh, Gotta have all the greats in there. Joe Carter as an announcer. He goes in
Yep.
with Chip. Chris Coughlin.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah,
The Dandy Little Glove Man, Mickey Morandini. He gets
I'd
in.
like to make a case for Steve Bushell. I mean, the guy held down third base for about 5 years in the '90s.
All Star Vance Law probably deserves a spot in
Yep.
there.
Maybe Vance will get his day in the sun.
That he was a. Yeah, but then they will run into stuff. I guess Starlin probably wasn't around long enough, but now there's the whole
No,
he's guy's suspended for the
he's
rest of the year
it's
with domestic
problematic
violence.
again.
He already had the one. He already had the thing with the Cubs.
Right, early in his career.
Yeah.
But plus, he's still playing. Like, what is he? Hero
Well,
Baines?
I mean,
Like,
when he's done, I don't know that he'll
yeah.
get in now.
Oh, he might not, but who knows? Things can change. Perceptions can change in the future. I think they're not going to be in a hurry to do the World Series, guys. I think we're going to probably. There's a little bit of a backlog. It starts with Grace and Sosa. I have to imagine. And I don't know of any other underlooked guys. I mean, they already fucking. I don't know, like if there's anybody that didn't get in at the expense of Don Kessinger. Like, I mean, quite frankly, now I'm getting pissed off that Leon Durham's not in if you're going to put in Kessinger. But
we joke, but about Baines lowering the bar. Kessinger. I mean, how do you put Kessinger in and not Jason Hayward?
yeah, Jesus, yeah.
He's won Gold Gloves too.
Well, or my guy
didn't hit
Keith,
either. Well, neither did fucking Kessinger.
or my guy Keith Moreland. Does Jody Davis? Jody was a two-time All-Star. I think Glen Beckert was only a one-time. I mean, maybe Beckert was there more, but I wonder if they will circle back.
I can't imagine Jody Davis doesn't get inducted.
Yeah, playoff team.
What about Sarge?
Yeah, I mean, end of his career, he was such a character. He was beloved by the left field bleacher bums. That's a good one.
Bob Dernier.
Yeah, so they probably will circle back maybe to some of those guys. I think they'll probably start though. The next wave is going to be that Grace Sosa, and I just think the World Series guys are going to be too. Like, even though there's no World Series guys that are retired really, other than maybe Lester by next year. Who knows? Or Arrieta. But it'll still be too soon, I think.
Yeah,
I think they're going to have to work.
I would think they'll do the 5-year thing. They'll wait for them to retire.
Yeah, they're going to work their way through Grace Sosa and maybe Lean Ramirez. I mean, if you're going to go with the best, those are the 4 next ones, right? I guess post 2000. I don't know if there's a fifth that you can add. I'd throw in John Lieber because he's my guy. But no, Carey. To be Carey, of course. That's the next 5. That's my prediction. If they do it to 5, who knows? Who the fuck knows how these people do this? But if it's 5 and it's the dust has been settled on all these past players, then it'll be fun to see how they handle the Sosa thing, though. But it's just it would be funny if they somehow try to get away with not putting him in next year. It's the ultimate elephant in the room.
So, I was just thinking, if you're going to put Kessinger in, and they did, what keeps Sean Dunston out of the Cub Hall of Fame?
You got a point, my friend. He was on the '89 team. He was a 2-time All-Star like Jody Davis. Fan favorite, popular guy. I think it's not too early, Andy.
We got the Sean meter in there. We don't need the actual player.
Do they have the Shawnometer honored? That guy was in the bleachers
Well, there's a version. One of the versions of the Shawnometer is in the real Hall of Fame.
in the Cooperstown.
Yep.
All
It's on a
right.
display. It's in fact, I think it's almost always up.
Yeah, I met the guy who did that. I was at a game in '98. If you could, Dunston was with the Indians. He had somewhere bounced around and went to an interleague game. And that guy, and I remember talking to him. He was in the left field bleachers because I think that's where he always sat. Right? It was in the bleachers. Yeah. So
the bleachers.
Shawnometer. Yeah, that's serious. I know he's your favorite player for serious and ironic reasons.
You don't think the career 295 on base percentage with the Cubs, his OPS plus 88 is higher than Kessinger and
Kessinger's. Beckert. Yeah, like you said, once Kessinger's in, then that argument becomes a lot easier to make.
You're gonna have a hard time keeping Louis Valbuena out then too.
Yep.
I'll go when they induct Louis. In fact, I will give because Louis, unfortunately, is not around to give his own speech. I will be happy to give his induction speech.
Better send that letter to Crane. So yeah, I suppose once they get all the typos cleared up and the plaques put away.
I should look if they fixed it because I made fun of them, and let's see if they
okay.
I'm gonna guess they didn't.
It was Orville overall. I know that I can tell you. So
yeah, it's fixed.
All right,
it's Orville now. It was Avril. I believe I posted a screenshot of it, so I have proof.
Good.
That it was Avril. I'm like, I don't think that's right, guys. Let's see. What Louis Valbuena's OPS plus for the... Oh, he's overqualified. 99. Although he only played... Well, here's where they're going to get it. He only played 3 years for the Cubs.
Oh, right. And
I don't think they can bring him back as an announcer or a coach because he's dead.
Well, and the other thing was like extensive or notable accomplishment or something? The bat flip on singles.
Right. Well, 2 things. He's not only that, but he also appealed his own check swings to third base. That's became a thing. Guys actually do that.
People do it now.
And guys do it. Javi still does it.
Javi does it. Javi does it, yeah.
So there's more than you ever wanted to know about the... Honestly, you know what? You and I, we spent, an hour and a half?
Closer to 2, I think.
2 hours talking about the Hall of Fame. We put more effort into this than they did putting the thing together. We had a longer conversation about all these guys than anybody on the Cubs did.
Well, I hope they appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll probably ask us to come in and reenact this on a special marquee.
And I'll just have to brush up on my Heine Zimmerman because I feel we didn't really provide much for him.
The panel will be you and me and Al and Bert from Bleacher Nation.
Excellent.
And Bert will talk about I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he should be. I don't. Well, yeah, I think so. No, I don't know.
The attorney getting both sides of it.
Himself into knots about.
Just rhetorical gymnastics. Yeah, I'm pretty clear. I think for the most part, I can't fault them for a lot of these decisions. It sticks in my craw a little bit, this overfatuation with the 16 Dorsey era Cubs. Chuck made a kind of a good point too. That is almost a pandering to a lot of the aging boomers that still hold on to cable TV because they can't quite navigate the world of streaming. And it's that core audience that is now basically their oldest, their oldest group demographic. And so let's get Kessinger and Beckert in.
Well, the good thing about the way they did this is because the Cubs have a ridiculously long history and a good one for a team that's only won 3 World Series.
Outside of the most recent
had a lot of great players.
Unpleasantness.
They basically, with this, they're up to like the 80s now. Like you don't have to go back. Kai Kyler's in. Andy Paff goes in.
That's right.
All those guys are in. They don't have
all those mustachioed 19th century
somebody
players.
may dig up a guy and be like, "How come this guy's not in?" But it won't be very many.
Somebody might come down the pipe with a Lon Warnicki argument or a Bill Lee because Bill Lee did lead the majors in ERA, which hadn't been done for a pennant winner until Kyle Hendricks did it. Yeah, but you're right. They actually did at least scoop up because I used to say for ages, like, why are they putting up statues for Santo and Banks and Williams? Those teams never won a pennant? Where's the Gabby Hartnett? And like, well, people, well, nobody knows who those guys are. So I do appreciate that those guys get their due. Guys, Rick Stevenson, Kai Kyler, even guys that we hadn't heard of, because I don't know my 19th century Cubs, although, I now, thanks to this, I've been a little bit educated. Now I'm familiar with John Clarkson and King. I knew about King Kelly, but
John Clarkson, Kelly Clarkson's dad.
Right? Yeah, Jimmy Ryan and his sweater vest that he played ball in. So yeah,
dapper Jimmy Ryan.
So I do like these things in spirit. It's just funny how even this family, they have such a tough time. Like they can't get out of their own way, even rolling this out.
Well, and why is it in the park? I mean, are they gonna? It's fine. During the off season, are they going to have access? Are they going to be hours? Can people come in and actually go to the Hall of Fame?
They should have tours if they don't.
If
in the
not,
winter.
you built all that monstrosity across the the grass patch. You couldn't have built the Hall of Fame there and turned it into this thing should be a tour.
That's true. Yeah, it should be a monument.
You've got to put it somewhere where people can just come to it.
Gallagher Way. Yeah, that's a great point.
They don't. There's a lot of shit they just don't think of.
No, but however it got here by hook or by crook, it's here, and it's
Shouldn't there have been? This is the other thing. Okay, so they have. Last I checked, they have a TV network that there's never anything on that's worth watching. The point
that's a good point.
How come this wasn't like the unveiling of the? Why wasn't this a 3-hour TV show tonight
or a 3-week one?
Yeah, they could roll it out by like. Category or decade and leave some suspense as to the last night. Oh shit, who isn't in yet?
Do they not have the budget for?
They threw it at the bottom. They literally this was a sentence at the bottom of a press release about giving themselves a fucking plaque.
Do they not have the budget for the production of people researching and getting video and photos and doing a whole thing that you could stretch it out to 3 months, or do they just don't know how to do it or don't want to, or that you're right, there's so much source material they could use to market around and just sort of
like Kyle and I talked about during the run up to the trade deadline. They have their own TV network. Every time one of those guys got traded, you should have been able to turn to Marquee and they're sitting there at the desk talking about who got traded and who they got back, and then you make Jed come on and defend the trade, and you do all that stuff because people are actually watching. Instead, they threw together a half-hour trade deadline special that aired, I think, maybe in the night after the trade deadline. It's like, why do you have a fucking TV channel then? What do you need it for if you're never going to use it?
Yeah. It's astonishing. So in spite of themselves, the Hall of Fame is here. And I enjoyed going through it just to reinforce what we already kind of knew and learn a few new things. Hippo Vaughn.
Yeah, or my favorite, Heine Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Come on. Who doesn't love Heine?
Who doesn't like a little bit of Heine in their life?
All right, well, that was fun. So next time we will get back to we will spin the wheel and we will get back to a season.
That'll work.
People are like, hey, you haven't done this for 3 weeks. I'm like, well,
right.
We've been working on this Hall of Fame special for weeks.
The research.
Like the fact that it really started 2 minutes before I hit record. I'm like, hey, you just want to go through the Hall of Famers instead of right. Okay, and then we did. So.
Right. We had thoughts.
All right, well, until next time.
Sounds good. We'll see you then.
Thanks.
Many of us have herpes.